Let's see if the sound comes on. I know it can be funky. Can you hear me? RD, I think I saw you in there. Let's see. All right, guys, give me a holler in the chat if you can hear me or not hear me. Hi, Stu's World. I see your posts 2 and 3 are backwards. Can you hear me? Can you hear me, guys? I hear you. Okay, RD, thank you. Okay. Happy Wednesday, guys. Back on track with Wednesdays. I want to just quickly, well, maybe a few stragglers come on in. I just wanted to share, make mention of a couple of upcoming, what are we at? We're at the 13th, right? Okay. So, upcoming videos would be, did we already have today's? Today was about bankruptcy. That came out probably at noon, I think. Tomorrow should be the replay of this live stream with all the gaps and waits for scrolling and finding questions eliminated. Friday is fraudulent review, and this is about a woman who stole her prisoner brother's benefits for 8 years. Saturday should be a fibromyalgia. I know the people that are members got to see it early, but it's an issue about missing specialists and how they're just so hard to find for fibromyalgia. And, you know, I kind of think of it's treated like the redheaded stepchild of impairments very unfairly. There's a few others that are treated poorly as well, but that one comes to mind a lot because it's a very common condition, unfortunately. Then coming up soon, we also have, on the work history report, the issue of stooping and how important it can be because there is a Social Security ruling on that and how it's often forgotten and not mentioned. And people say they do a 0 stooping, which apparently, even according to the SSA, cannot be possible. Not in any job anyway. And then I'll just give one more. There is the question about whether attorney's fees can be taken from future benefits and what the lowdown is on how attorney's fees occur when there's no back benefits. All right, so that's enough about that. Let's get back to you guys. Okay, going to the top. RD, you were here bright and early. I appreciate. We have RD. We have Stu's World. Sharon's here. Thank you, Sharon. Julia Holmes. That seems like a new name. Nice to see you. Steve Henderson. Good to see you back again. Kevin Johnson. Same to you. Okay, starting at the top, as always. RD says, where are we at here? I have peripheral neuropathy and nerve root compression. Oh, my primary doctor signed the DMV handicap placard, but would not help with my function report. Okay, your function report is about what you experience at home, not what your doctor sees in the doctor's office. That's his records, what he narrates. Your function report is about what you are saying about your activities of daily living, your symptoms and everything. It's all totally different. One is your subjective, personal experiences and it has nothing to do with diagnosing yourself or anything like that. So I wouldn't expect a doctor to do a function report. And as you probably might know, the doctors rarely are willing to even do a medical source opinion on what they say would be your limitations on lifting, walking, standing because of your medical condition that they are aware of. So some of them, you know, I'd say the minority of them do step up and do it when their claimants, clients, patients ask them to, or their attorney. Most will not. And some of the ones that do want to charge you like $500. So it's really kind of a dirty thing, I think. I don't know why a doctor who treats you because of the effects on your life from medical problems won't then share what he knows about you. It seems like it's a racket. I don't know. It doesn't seem right. Because he has to know of those things in order to be able to properly treat you for your condition. Because the repercussions of your condition are what it's all about, right? So don't even get me started. So RD says, my question is, will this DMV application help with my SSD claim if it is in the medical record? You know what I do? It's not really a huge piece of evidence, but I always include them if my client has a placard. Sometimes I'll just send the placard up. It's never going to be conclusive because it doesn't really define what you can and cannot do. It just gives a suggestion that you should be able to park closer, but it doesn't really say why. But if you have the application, you have what he signed, and you have the placard, I'd shoot him up there. It's a crumb. It's probably a minor crumb because every doctor will do it for almost anybody who asks them. So, it's the easy thing to do. So they don't hold a huge amount of water, but they are better than not having it. So I would send it up. Stu's World says, oh wait, did I miss one? No, okay. Hi, Stu. It says, hi, Stephanie. I received an email from the SSA on May 13th acknowledging that the appointment of representative was signed by me and my son. Okay. So either you're the rep or your son's the rep, right? Stu goes on to say, oops, same thing. Okay. All it has is my profile info. Did I miss a step? What do you mean a profile info? Also, when I call and they ask for a social security number, do I provide his or mine? Usually it's the person who's the claimant, who's claiming, I assume your child, you're seeking benefits for your child because he's disabled, right, Stu? Then it would be his. Now, if he's, because that would be SSI, I think, because he can't get SSD on his own work record, only SSI. Now, if he was getting a child's benefit as a dependent, which you don't have to be disabled, but because maybe you were collecting disability or you were collecting retirement, then they usually need both at some point. One is the number holder, that would be you, whoever is the one that has the work record upon which these insurance benefits were paid through. You paid, whoever was the worker paid the premiums, and that's the number holder. They're still going to need both, though, because they need the child's for identification purposes with that, too. But you just got to ask them. I'm not sure what you mean, but all it has is my profile info. I'm not really sure what you mean by that. So Stu goes on to say, I called yesterday, August 12th, and the rep saw nothing about me being my son's appointed representative and could not tell me what to do to resolve this. When I log into BSO, there was no appointment showing. Why don't you get another, see that E1696, maybe you didn't click it through. That's the electronic version. I do all mine in hard paper, and then I fax them in. I didn't think I did it once or twice with the E, and I just didn't like it because you still have to walk your client through how to do the E way of doing it. Most people are familiar with paper, sign it, send it back, You can do another 1696 at any time, and I would, because there is, well, you probably didn't do this. Yeah, you said you did it in May. Yeah, just get the paper version. It's online, and just fill it out and send it in and change that up. If they might have lost it, it might have gotten lost in the system, right? So that way you know for sure. Okay. Sharon says she hears me. Okay. Hi, Sharon. Julia Holmes. Good afternoon from Texas. Yes, I can hear you. Thank you, Julia. I appreciate that. Steve. Nice to see you. Kevin Johnson is saying hello to everybody from Tennessee. Sharon says, so happy to make it today. I'm so glad you're here too. Can you talk about what happens when a 20-year-old applies and hopefully gets approved for SSI, but has a deceased mother who had SS benefits? Sure. Super, super important, right? So a person who is disabled and is over the age of 18, if they're poor enough, they can apply for SSI, similar to how they may have been on SSI as a child if their parents weren't wealthy and they weren't wealthy. But once they hit 18, they have to prove with the SSI that they are disabled under the adult standard of disability, which is different from the child standard, obviously, because children are not expected to work, have capacity to work, all that. So at 18, a person with SSI, or if they never had it, has to prove the adult standard. DAC is disabled adult child, and that would be for that very same SSI kid, young adult, or maybe one who did work a little bit and has a little bit of SSD insured status time period left. But nonetheless, that person, if the parent is collecting or deceased, collecting disability, collecting retirement, or is deceased, that child, because he or she's claiming to have been disabled before the age of 22, can file for the DAC, Disabled Adult Child Benefit, based on that parent work record. They have to prove they were disabled under the rules that will apply to both SSI and SSD, whichever one may or may not apply, because you could be eligible for SSI, for SSDI on your own work record as a young adult if you did a little bit of part-time work, and DAC. And then you're going to get the biggest amount that's available under any of those. So, yeah. So I'm not sure what in specific, Sharon, you would be wanting to know about, but the disability finding the adjudicator makes once that person applies is going to apply to all three. If they had let's say they were now 23 and they're applying for the first time, they have to prove through the evidence that existed before the age of 22 that they became disabled before the age of 22 and remained disabled the whole time, from evidence born before age 22. So you do have one shot. I mean, if someone doesn't, sometimes people don't file for DAC until like they're 40 because their parent never, thankfully, passed away, didn't retire, didn't, become disabled. And much later, that DAC child can now file for DAC when mom or dad starts collecting retirement. One of the difficulties of that can be that they no longer have the medical records available from when they were before the age of 22. I think I have a video quite some time ago, at least a year ago, just kind of suggesting to parents of disabled kids that you don't know what's going to happen. Get all the medical records now. Get the IEPs from school. Keep a file on it. Keep a paper file. Maybe scan them all in and make them digital too. Keep it all together, because 20 years from now, that child might need that information in order to prove a DAC case and get a benefit on your work record, because they didn't have the opportunity to make a really robust work record of their own because of their disability. And then some kids are disabled, but they're able to work enough to get insured status. They might still have been under SGA the whole time, but you can still get insured status on your own work record. And they might get part their own, part DAC, and if it's really low, part SSI, if they're otherwise poor enough. No savings, that kind of thing. Let me know if you have any specific questions about that, Sharon. I'm just going off broadly here since it was kind of vague. Julia asks, is an outbreak on the bodies is a disability? I'm not sure what you mean, Julia. Do you mean like a skin infection? Skins can have impairments. We have psoriasis, eczema. They might not find it to be disabling from all jobs, but it could certainly be eliminating some jobs that cannot have skin breakouts due to germs and stuff like that. It could be germs for the other people, not to mention the individual with maybe some compromised skin. It could, think about it. If it's itchy, it could be one that is so distracting that they're not going to be able to do a high-skilled, high-thinking job because of the distraction. And one might be able to prove, if they have this all proven through medical records and their own testimony, that would eliminate some jobs, of course. It's not going to eliminate, for sure, unskilled jobs that you don't need to be much concentrating at all. In fact, you can have a bit of cognitive loss and still perform them, as per descriptions in the Dictionary of Occupational Titles and other things. So it can be an impairment, Julia. Remember, there's impairments that have to be medically determinable impairments, MDIs. Once there's an impairment, then it has to be determined that there's at least one of those impairments is severe, even if the other ones are not severe. And then they consider them all as to whether it would knock out all jobs in that big bowl of 12,000 occupations we have to dismantle and get rid of for each claimant. So the skin infections can certainly eliminate some jobs. Maybe it would be where that person can't be doing cooking in the kitchen because they can't be touching all the food if they have sores on their hands, for instance. Now, granted, people wear gloves, but perhaps the gloves are not good for the hands, right? Latex or whatever. Salvatore Emma, haven't seen you guys in a while. Okay, just to follow up on SSA emergency memo. Yeah, so refresh me on what that is, because there's a million emergency memos. So give a holler. I don't even know if I did anything on that one. I don't think I've done one recently. So should I look it up? 250 250.46. I can go do that right now. SA 250.46. Oops. Nope. I don't want to do that. I'm going to have to read that. You might not be aware, but SSA has always had access to many private things. Once we make a claim, we actually have to give up the right to keep things privately. That's how they know if people are working. They get all that tax information, even though the worker didn't report it to them. So if that's what you're referring to, because I saw that has to do with banking, it's really no different than before. It's not. For instance, if you are, let's say you're collecting retirement between 62 and 67, early retirement, you are subject to an earnings test. You have to be largely retired, but you could still earn, I think it's like 20,000 or something, but find the exact number for this year, times it by 12. And if you are, even if you don't report it, that's going to end up biting you in the butt with an overpayment of retirement. Same is true with disabled people who are secretly working and not telling the SSA. It eventually comes down the pike. They've always had SSI people constantly. Their bank accounts are actually, there is some sort of review every month. So when their bank account pops over after the first of the month and it's over the $2,000 limit for a single person on SSI, the SSA finds out about it. So this is not really anything new. They're just probably being more transparent about it now. So I wouldn't worry about it unless you're doing some sort of fraud. I wouldn't worry about it at all. Truly. They've always been in there. Always. And the direct deposit information they collect is really just for the direct deposit. They have to have your banking and routing in order for them to send you your money. So, but I didn't read that emergency message, Salvatore. So I will read it later, I suppose. It's probably in the inbox someplace. Hi, Daryl. Nice to see you. Daryl is I was going to say one of our big winners recently. Not my personal big winner, but for all of us here. Julie says, is stress a disability? Stress is like an environmental thing, and it can also be a symptom. Depends how you look at it, I think, Julia. Like one of the questions on function reports is, how well do you manage stress? And this is usually for mental health folks, because stress is harder for someone who has mental health challenges oftentimes than someone who has none, because people who don't have a disorder or a condition currently with mental health can usually handle stress in a healthy manner, at least for a certain amount of time that's considered reasonable. And then if things start flying south, sometimes long-term stress can make that most mentally healthy of people, come under mental health concerns, right? Anxiety, poor sleep, that kind of thing. Julie says, the reason why I ask is because I took an allergy test at the doctor office and now I have to give my own self-allergy shot. Okay, I'm not sure what that has to do with stress, except if you don't like to give yourself a shot. I've never given myself a shot of anything. We were just talking about this yesterday because my husband had been getting B12 shots after he came down with Bell's palsy in October. And the B12, which wasn't prescribed for a number of months after, and then he had to go, did a blood test, and he had like 0 B12 in his system. So they were giving him weekly shots, and it really improved his neurological symptoms from the damaged or inflamed nerve, which I forget which nerve it is. Or it's this side, I think. One of the 12 cranial nerves. But we were saying, too bad they don't let you, because he can't always get there because his doctor is 2.5 hours from work, because his doctor is here and he works over by Harrisburg. So it's kind of a pain on a Friday for him to go. So we were like, wouldn't it be nice if they just gave you the shots and you can give it to yourself? I mean, people do it with insulin. People do it with a lot of things, right? And apparently you're getting your own self-allergy shots, which I think is fascinating, because my children were both supposed to get allergy shots. My son was doing it a lot longer, but now his schedule kind of gets in the way sometimes. But it would be nice if it could be done at home, right? And I'm gonna guess that giving yourself the shot stresses you out. It's not gonna be. That's probably not gonna be what's gonna be disabling. It could be a symptom. So for 2 seconds a day, you're feeling extra stress. I don't think it's gonna be one that's gonna put you over the disabled route. But you have to look at everything else. What are your other impairments? And then all those things can add up if the goods are there. Hi, George. God, I love you. He says it's the best disability lawyer on the tube. Like, share, subscribe. That's very sweet, George. I appreciate the support. Rat's Nest, good to see you again. I wanted to pop in and say hi. I'm in the hospital. Oh my gosh, I got my denial. Spirits are up and ready to appeal. Good. Do that. Keep at it. Don't give up. And I hope you're getting better in that hospital. We'll be thinking about you. Stu says, my post got switched up for some reason. I called yesterday, August 12th, and the rep saw nothing about me being, yeah. So I would just send in another 1696. I would fax it into the field office, Stu. You can get it right online. You can have it done today. Boom, fax it right in. Oh, Maurice says, asks, do veterans benefits count towards SGA? No, not at all. And you can get both. Assuming it's like P&T, not the needs-based veteran benefit for poor veterans, because that would be needs-based like SSI, and every other money you get in is going to be one less dollar they need to send you. But usually we're talking about P&T, right? La Lulu is in the house. Good to see you, my dear. Hiya, back at you. Sharon says, so does the applicant have to apply separately for DAC, or will it occur automatically? Good question. If the SSI application is approved and the adjudicator sees the mother is deceased, I would go ahead and make sure yourself that it gets done. Sometimes I feel like, and I can't say this with certainty, but you know, an SSI application is deemed an application for Social Security. So they're going to see your child doesn't have his own Social Security work record, perhaps, and then you're like, well, then that's going to be the end of the inquiry. I'm not sure, because I have seen where people seem to have to go and proactively say, you know, and because in this case it's a survivor benefit, I know with survivor benefits we had to go have an in-person appointment and all that and present death certificate and all that business. So you're going to want to, I say, do not assume it's going to be automatic, or you might regret it. I would get someone on the phone and make sure there is a DAC application specifically. And I'm guessing your child doesn't have their own work record. Would that be fair to say? So you know it wouldn't be a typical SSDI case. It would be DAC only, maybe. I would make for sure, and I would make sure the request is kind of in writing, you know, because they're going to have to fill out all the 3368, the function report, if there's work history. Salvatore says, supposedly beginning with SSI, it's always been SSI, yeah. SSI recipients, SSI will soon be allowed to go into your personal bank accounts to survey. They've already been doing that. This is not new. How do you think they nail every single SSI person who gets a $10,000 inheritance, sticks it in their bank account and doesn't report? It's because they can see that. And they do something on a monthly basis, because now I say it's on a monthly basis, and it probably is, but it might be delayed because, or maybe it's just that the SSA people were slow, because they will sometimes not be alerted that they have so let's say they have $10,000 sitting in the account in August 5th or whatever. That's going to count as an overpayment. As over the resources, and assuming it came in the month before, because they kept it for an extra month. It's got to be gone by the next month. And they might not get alerted. They keep it in there. They're thinking everything's all hunky-dory, forgetting that they're on welfare and you're not allowed to have a lot of money and collect the welfare at the same time. And they will get something like 6 months later that say, we believe you're over the resources, so we're going to terminate your SSI unless you have some sort of justification that would meet the laws or something. And now that 6 months, they've been getting the $900 or $1,000, whatever it is now, a month since then. So that's $6,000. They're in overpayment because those payments continued because nobody yanks it out from under your feet until they know to do it. So that's the danger of that. But I did understand that they were going to try to be more timely so that these $6,000 overpayments that really are hard for people to pay back, even if it's their own dumb fault for not reporting it, or they reported it and someone at the SSA didn't process that information and kept the payments going when it should have been, oh, you said you have 10. Okay, we got to halt this. If you spend it down and now you're below the 2,000, let us know. We'll pop your SSI benefits back in. That's been going on forever. But there was, reports last year, credible ones, that they were going to try to be more timely to prevent people from getting stuck in these overpayment situations. So, the people that are trying to make it sound like some big, horrible, big brother thing, it's really not. It's always been there. They're just trying to do it more timely so that people don't get screwed as much with overpayments. I think it's good. Nobody likes an overpayment. They get their benefits get curtailed because they collected money they weren't owed. So let's stop those errors from happening. And that's generally what the theory is on that. I have not read the one that you were just talking about, Sal, and I will do that. But I suspect it's all about that. So, but they already have access to banking information. That's not new. Now SSD, I would expect, yes, they have. I mean, it is an oversight for people who are now SSD money in the bank does not mean you're not eligible for SSD. But if it's from an employer and they already have, and they're trying to get this more timely too. It used to be, I think, quarterly. Don't hold me to the innards of how that works, but the SSA gets routine reports, whether it's from the IRS or whatever, when employers say, hey, I just paid this person with this social security number. And so now suddenly they know that this disabled person is working. And if that amount is more than SGA that they see, then they could be, their trial work period could be coming into play. If they're in their extended period of eligibility or beyond that 3-year period, it could be they're ceased right away because you're not disabled if you're doing that at a certain point in time. Remember, we get a certain amount of trial work period and all that protective stuff. But this is really important. Now, Social Security retirement, it's only important if someone is collecting early retirement because they're claiming to not be working beyond a certain amount. So once you're 67 or whatever your full retirement age is, you can earn $1 million. You're totally entitled to, and it's not going to affect your Social Security retirement insurance benefits because that's what you bought in for. It's the early retirement people that have claimed to not be working, beyond the earnings limit. And if they're not being honest about that, whether it's accidentally by mistake, they forgot, had a brain fart, whatever, the SSA has to learn about that because it's sending money to them that they're not owed. And that stuff all depletes the Social Security funds that we're also concerned about. Yet no one wants to seem to do anything about the errors that make money flow out of there where it shouldn't be. So they're just trying to tighten up all those obvious things. And those things were already in existence. They're just trying to do it on a more timely basis so people don't get stuck with overpayments that could have been prevented had the SSA been aware at an earlier date. Because I would say probably 90% of overpayments are inadvertent, ignorant mistakes by the claimant. It's not on purpose. They're not trying to defraud the SSA by getting this money they're not entitled to. They just didn't realize. So if they can be prevented from their own errors, which also costs the funds a ton, because more often than not, the person's going to, if they're hard up for money, which most disabled people are, for instance, they're going to not ever be able to pay it back. They're going to be on a payment plan, one that $20 a month or $50 a month or whatever. If they're 60 years old, what's the chance of paying back $50,000 at $20 a month or $50 a month before you pass on to greener pastures, right? So, we do the overpayments to just get back what one can without decimating somebody and putting them on the street. But it's never going to actually pay it back. So to prevent the overpayment to begin with, is really critical. And I totally applaud it. And they've already had access to your bank information. So that's nothing new. It might just be that they're going to be using it in a more timely fashion instead of sitting on it. People report when they're working and they send it in, they're doing the right thing. And then sometimes the SSA people don't do anything with it. So until 9 months later, and they're like, oh, you have a 9-month overpayment. We didn't shut you off back when you told us. And now the person is going to be stripped of the next 9 months of payments, to pay it all back of what they weren't supposed to get. I mean, that's a real shame. And it creates such a hardship for the claimants, aside from really, really putting a crunch on the funds that shouldn't be there. So to prevent it by having more accurate, timely information that they already have access to, I think is good. Robert Bruce. Oh, you have two first names. Me too. Thank you, Robert. Good morning to you too. It's actually good afternoon here. I'm Eastern time. John Kalamas. Hi, Stephanie. Can you talk about how SSA tracks monthly SGA? Do they look at yearly IRS earnings, or are we required to provide all of our monthly payroll information when we file for SSDI? Thank you very much. It really is it's funny. It's kind of like what we were just talking about, John, in a little bit of a way. When we file, we tell them they get our most recent W-2s, right? Sometimes if the IRS batches have not run those numbers yet, because remember, we file by April. People do extensions through October. Some people are late, whatever. It used to be there was like an annual batch reporting, if I recall, from IRS to SSA. And because of that, they might not have your most recent, like 2024 earnings. So they don't know whether it's over SGA or not. They will ask on application for you to send your W-2s from your 2024 work, because they won't already have the information necessarily. So then you do, and they see that it's under SGA and everything's kosher. They might send you an 821 so you can confirm what hours you're working to make that income, because that's going to be the activity being over SGA. Let's say you're working 40 hours a week, but you're getting paid under SGA. You're still going to be not able to file a claim because your activity is SGA, even though you're not taking a paycheck for it, all of it, right? Let's see what else is in your question. They do look IRS. Yes, they're definitely, those two fingers are together, IRS and SSD. I always felt like, and we were just talking about the fact that sometimes you would report something and the SSA didn't do anything about it, and it turns out you were over SGA. You just didn't realize, some people don't keep on top of the rules, and SSA doesn't do anything with it. Now you have a year-long or 3-year-long or 6-month-long, whatever, overpayment, which is devastating. I always say, just report. Like when you tell them you're working and you're making $1,000 a month, that's under SGA. That's actually even under trial work period amount. And they will often say, okay, if it changes, let us know. And the written narratives they give you in letters once you win says, if anything changes with your work, let us know. That way they can see, well, okay, she's under SGA now. She's going to tell us if she changes that. And we will look again and see if the change means it's over SGA or TWP or whatever. So I still, even though sometimes the SSA people will tell people, yeah, don't even tell us about it. I'm like, tell them anyway, and send it where you have tracking that you sent it. So if it ever comes up later, not that they usually generally assume it's by accident. There's no big allegations of fraud or anything, particularly when you're doing a W-2 job where there's no fraud possible, really, because your employer is reporting. But at least you've got hey, I was reporting it all along. They just didn't do their job. It's not going to get you out of an overpayment, but it certainly is going to defeat. If there were ever going to be allegations of fault, it would be that there was no fault. You reported it as you were supposed to. Yeah. So when you file, John, if you're still working, you're gonna provide that stuff. The 2024 pay stubs, tax returns sometimes. If it's self-employment, it's a little more complicated, but we see that all the time too. Salvatore, Emma, you're very welcome. And thanks for bringing up that that EM. I'm going to go check it out, hopefully later today, just to see what the latest update is. Robert Bruce says, I have a question. I'm 100% disabled, mental and physical, in my 60s. I got on disability in 2003. I think I have Medicaid, but they said if I tried taking a job, I would lose my Medicaid, like answering phone. If you're on Medicaid, that means that you are on the poorer side. So you could have SSI, Robert, or you have SSD. Remember, SSI is the welfare program called Supplemental Security Income. It is handled by the SSA as one of the disability programs, the other one being SSDI or SSD, Social Security Disability. I know they make those acronyms very similar. I think one almost has to think they did that by design to confuse people. One is welfare, SSI. One is not welfare. It's insurance that you bought, SSD. So if you were a worker sufficiently close in time to when you filed and claimed to be disabled, Robert, that would be SSD. However, and sometimes people with SSD, you're eligible for Medicare, but if your SSD is low enough, you might be poor enough for Medicaid as well. And sometimes a person could be dual eligible, and sometimes the Medicaid will pay the Medicare premium, which is like $180 or $185 a month. Plus, it may pay for the copays and the deductible for the Medicare, because Medicare is more like regular insurance. Medicaid is kind of like everything is free for the recipient, because it's welfare for needs based. They need it supposedly, and most do. I think they're saying if you take a job, your income might go up such that you are no longer poor enough for the Medicaid. So your Medicaid program, which is a local program, each state kind of gears it the way they want it. You want to find out, well, can I earn anything and keep my Medicaid given what I have from SSI or SSD? You really want to maybe talk to a caseworker there and find out. Because I know if you're kind of jonesing to do a little bit of part-time work, which I think is great because it's great for the mental, it can be great for the physical, getting you up and out there, social, all that kind of stuff. Just find out what if anything can you do in terms of earning money at a gainful job, but very, very part-time. Maybe let's say you could do 6 hours a week if you're only making $12 an hour. Maybe not, but you got to find out before you risk it, I'd say. Randy, hey there. My job requires lifting 70 pounds occasionally. I believe that falls in between heavy and me. I want to say it's heavy. I think medium goes up to 50, and then after that, it's heavy, I think. Yeah, Randy, that's a lot. It does. I forget your vocational profile, but it does lend itself, that kind of work, to potentially having an easier route to a grid if you're over 50. Particularly if you're over 55. But yeah, that's pretty heavy. There's plenty of jobs that have that kind of mandatory lifting ability, but most jobs do not, and most people can't do that. So yeah. H said, hey, just wanted to thank you for all your videos. Thank you, H. I appreciate. Or is it H or AI Tech? Ooh. I'm dealing with AI right now, trying to get some automation of certain things. It's probably going to bankrupt me, but I just really want to do it. It'll make certain very mundane things faster, easier, so I can concentrate more on the legal strategy side of things. Thank you, Robert. I appreciate that. Hit the like button, he says. Julia says, can you get both SSI and SSDI if you have a lawyer? Of course. It won't matter whether you have a lawyer. You can get it with an attorney representative or without, if your evidence meets both of those programs. SSI and SSDI have the same definition of being disabled, so you have to meet that definition, Julia. And then each one has two separate other criteria, the non-medical criteria. So SSI, you have to be poor, so under a certain amount of resources and under a certain amount of income. So that's SSI, the poorness factor. SSDI, there is no poorness factor because it's insurance you bought and paid for if you're insured for it, like auto insurance or health insurance or life insurance or whatever, renter's insurance. But SSDI requires that you are insured currently. At the time you become disabled, you have to be insured, have insured status coverage under the SSDI program. And that results from recent sufficient work where you paid the taxes. And when I say the taxes, I'm referring to the Social Security taxes, not your federal, state, or local income tax. Those are separate. So you need to meet all those to get both. And oftentimes, I should add, Julia, if you get the SSDI and that amount is over $1,000, it's going to knock out the SSI because now your $1,000 of SSD makes you not poor enough for the SSI. Okay. Is military retirement counted against SSDI? No. The disciple, that was Daryl. Hi, Daryl. Dio says, I wrote a second letter to the appeals council after remand was denied again by ALJ. That was pointless. I named the judges specifically who wrote the initial remand to get their attention again. If appeals council already denied you, they have no jurisdiction to look at a second letter. It's done. You have to just take the action. Although maybe so you wrote a second letter to the appeals council after remand was denied again by the ALJ. So you appealed to the appeals council the second time, right? ALJ denied you and you're appealing to the appeals council and you're submitting a letter, I guess. I don't know that naming the judges is going to matter. They know who the judges are. You know, they do. Sharon, you're welcome. Art of Practice, good to see you. He says, have you been able to access your client's disability determination explanation on denied initial claims? Did we talk about that before, Art? Oh, no, what you're saying, will SSA not provide it to the claimant even with a request via release of it? SSA has to provide you with your DDE if you request it as a claimant. You don't need a lawyer for that. You might get a remiss worker in your field office, but that 3288 gets you your entire file if you want it, or if you only want the DDE, it'll get you that. And they have to do it. And the POMS says they have to do it. And they can't deny you that DDE. I can, and I haven't checked the reliability. You know, as of June 7th, we were to have access to the A section, which has the DDE. I did notice that it only seemed to be new cases or new DDEs that were getting plopped in. Cases that were already in I could see the cases. The folder A showed up, but the DDE wasn't in it. So I know there are, some glitchy little things coming out of that. And I haven't checked lately to see if they've gotten that squared away yet. I don't know. But when I get a new denial, if I get a new denial, that DDE should be in there then, because now the A section is existing. And so, but if you don't have a attorney rep, you should definitely be able to get it from the SSA field office. And don't let them say they can't. I mean, be polite and everything, of course. Get more bees with honey, but do not let them tell you that they can't give it to you. They might say you have to fill out a 3288. Fine, just do it. It's online. But it's really important because it's going to tell you a lot. It's going to tell you what the RFC they assigned to you, which is probably what got you denied. Yeah, it's important. And it'll tell you a bit about if you're awarded. I think it's not bad to have it either, because you're going to have a CDR one day, and that's kind of like your comparison point information for later. Sam, I am. Dr. Seuss. Hello, an SSA rep is reviewing the ALJ decision of a non-medical requirement for disability. What does that mean? Okay, Sam, you got your ALJ decision. Was it an award? I assume it was. You've seen your ALJ decision, right? So if the ALJ awarded you and now it's going for non-medical review, that's usually just a formality. If you already know you have an award, it's just to make sure they double check that you actually were insured, you know, make sure you're not a fugitive, a fleeing felon. Yeah, things like that. Any offsets, if you have like arrearages and alimony or child support, they need to know whether they need to take that out before they pay you, that kind of thing. Jerome Barlow. Hi, Jerome. If your grandmother had rights over you and was your payee, meaning my mom signed over her rights, they both received SSI and both are deceased, do I qualify or anything else if I'm approved? Probably not. So I take it your mom and your grandmom were on SSI welfare. They have since passed. You are disabled and you are filing for SSI or Social Security disability, depending on your work record, right? And if you're poor enough. The only way that anything that they had, particularly your mother, unless your grandmother adopted you, but it doesn't sound like it. It sounds like she maybe just had custody. If you could prove that you were disabled before the age of 22, and if your mother had a work record, you could perhaps get DAC, Disabled Adult Child Benefits, under her work record, if you prove you were disabled before you were age 22 through medical records, and that it continued to the present. So otherwise, there is no parent to, you know, collect off of their work record. That is the insurance they bought. If my child is disabled before the age of 22, I want my insurance to pay, you know, pay a benefit to them. Jerome says, I was a child when I received benefits also. Again, now that was, if you were disabled as a child, then that means you were collecting SSI. And which makes sense, like if your mom was SSI, that means she was kind of poor, your grandma, so that you as a child were poor enough because our parents' money is deemed down to us. And that's how you could have gotten SSI as a disabled child. We don't get SSD as disabled children because we don't have a work record. But we could get dependent benefits if our parent had Social Security disability insurance benefits coming to them, or retirement benefits, because then we could get a dependent insurance benefit based on that while we are a dependent. But that sounds too, Jerome, you were disabled as a child. If you can prove that that disability was also disabling as an adult from medical records before your age 22 and every year since, you could get DAC perhaps if your mom ever had a Social Security insured status for like retirement, vested. She didn't have to be getting disability to get that, because that has a whole nother set of requirements compared to retirement. But if you are filing for SSI now, Jerome, they are supposed to check for SSD, but they don't always check for DAC. So you might want to inquire about that if you had a parent who ever became Social Security vested and is now passed or disabled or retired and collecting. Okay. I mean, you may as well try for both, right? SSI and DAC. DAC is, I think, the preferred one. Sometimes you can get both. If the DAC is so low, you're still going to get a little boost from the SSI. La Lulu says, we've had injectable B12 prescriptions in my household for daily and or weekly at-home use. Very fine, short needles make it easy for self-administering. Cost is reasonable. Wow, that's really, that's cool, and that makes sense. Why wouldn't they offer that to him instead of him having to like take part of a work day off? Very infuriating. You know how scarce days off are, personal days, vacation days, and all that. Hi again, Randy. Randy says, to go from medium heavy down to light, I have to go down 1.5 levels to make it to light to qualify for the grids. You have to prove, okay, 59 years old, Randy. Once you stop working, of course, or make it under SGA, because you know you can't file while you're still working. If you can prove, we don't really talk about 1.5 levels. It's just that if they find that your medical problems prevent you from lifting medium or higher, and you can only lift 20 pounds light or sedentary, then you meet that prong of the grids. The one that says you have to be not able to lift medium. right? You have to be RFC to light or less. So yeah, you have to prove that. Now, if you're still at a job lifting 70 pounds and tomorrow you stop working, it's going to look it might look a little funny, like you were able to lift 70 pounds yesterday, not today. So you might want to strategize how you get your evidence of where you deteriorated enough to not be able to do the 70 again. You and I don't know if we discussed that or not, but it's something you're probably going to want to do. It doesn't take long, just a few months, but it's kind of an important strategy for a better case on initial. But yeah, so don't look at it as 1.5 levels. All you have to prove is that you can't do medium or above, which will also prove that you can't do your old job. So that's the second prong. And the third one is that you can't transfer those brainiac skills from the job you did to something sedentary like that they say you could now do. So as long as those skills are not transferable, and a lot of those really physically arduous jobs do not have transferable skills. They might have skills. It could be a high skilled job, but they're not transferable to a desk job or a little late job. They just don't transfer. And at 59, and I'm like right behind you, Randy, there is narrative about, particularly at 60, but I think it applies to 50, about if you're going to make that person take a different job, like in theory, he could do this job, that job better be in the same industry, same procedure, same this, same that, like very little adjustment for the person. Because they recognize that in our 50s, we could do what we do stellar. Try to put us in another skilled job, and we're like, yeah, you know, like we don't transfer that well anymore. We could do it when we were 30, but doing it at, you know, I'll be 58 in a couple weeks. It's just not the same. You know, we got to kind of stick to our pay lane. That's what I always say. Sam I Am says, I'm 61 with back, neck, and knee problems. Why would they classify it as nonsensical decision? Why would they classify it? What is it? What do you mean? What do you mean? Oh, that would just be, no, you're talking about the non-medical requirement. That's not nonsensical. Maybe you didn't mean to type that. Because remember, for SSD, Sam, you have to be insured for SSD to get it. So if the judge found you medically disabled, that's awesome. That's the big battle. And when you first filed, they did check to make sure you were insured for SSD, assuming it's SSD we're talking about. If it's SSI, it's a little more complicated because every month you have to be poor enough. So they will check again. But if it's SSD, they wouldn't have let the case go on unless they had originally found when you applied that you were in fact insured and you met those non-medical requirements. Now they double check it. That's all. It's like a formality. It's just a double check. SSI is a little harder. You have to remain poor under the 2,000 for single people in the bank and accountable resources and incomes. So that's just what they check. They're not checking. Remember, it said non-medical. They're not checking the medical, only the non-medical criteria, because each program has non-medical criteria. And they check them in the beginning when you apply, and they're just double checking to make sure it's still all accurate. Okay? This is a double check. I wouldn't worry. Okay. Did I leave anybody out? Okay. Rude Rabbit is in the house. Nice to see you. That SSA EM just has an innocuous sentence near the end that some are inferring things against. Oh, thank you. I know. And then you probably have a bunch of YouTubers up there going, fascism. It's ridiculous. It's like I said, it's always been there. They're just trying to be more timely. And that's what they reported they were going to try to do months ago. They're like, we want to get this so that people are not out of the blue stuck with a 2-year overpayment because we didn't do our job. They're trying to make it more seamless. If you started working last month and you forgot, they want to know this month so that you don't get all this debt on your books, right? Because that debt can hang on to you in your retirement and you're still paying it back. And who needs to do that, right? Philip VC, if I apply for benefits in October, can I select the start month? Yeah, if you were applying for retirement, right? I assume you're talking about retirement, Philip? You can, but I don't think they're going to take an application if you want it more than 3 months in the future. They're going to say come back when you're closer to that time frame, if they're still doing it that way. I assume they are. But yeah, for sure, because you don't want to wait until the month you turn 67 or whatever age you plan on doing it, because it's going to, it could take them a number of weeks to process it. And so if you wanted it that month, it would be later anyway. You can also, I believe, if you decided you wanted it, let's say you're 66 and you're like, I really could use a little chunk of change right now. I'm going to try to apply. And I'm just trying to think. I think with early retirement, you can do this. I think you can go back up to 6 months and say, I want to apply as of that date. Double check that though, that you can do a little retro, like maybe 6 months worth. I think so. I don't think it's just at full retirement and above. It might be, but I think it also applies to early retirement. But I can't swear by it. It's been like 10 years before I looked at that. Sam, I am says I'm 61 with neck back knee. Why would they classify it as a non-medical ALJ decision? What are they classifying as a non-medical ALJ decision? If you went to the ALJ on the medical decision of disability, that's a medical decision. We do go to ALJ sometimes for things that are not medical claims. Like if we got denied, I'm trying to think of an example, something non-medical, and we're like, we appealed it. That's not true. That's not true. That's not true. I do have more, then feasibly, a different issue can go before an ALJ, but it's not a medical decision. He's not deciding whether someone's disabled. He's deciding this other fact thing. Like, for instance, if you say, I wasn't working SGA, it was under SGA because I have IRWs, impairment-related work expenses that should be deducted to show that I'm under SGA. If the SSA ignores it, you have to appeal that particular finding that you worked SGA all the way up to the ALJ. That would be a non-medical decision that he has to make. But you said you were going back for non-medical review. That's just what they have to do with everyone who gets an award. And unfortunately, they do it for people. They message out that they're doing it for everybody when they shouldn't be doing it for people who don't win their disability battle on the medical side. And we hash that out a lot, don't we, guys? Going on, 2 years now? Hi, Matthew McGraw. Nice to see you. Oops. Randy says, yeah, I have probably a couple letter carriers as we speak, Randy. Letter carriers get disabled a lot before they are of full retirement age. And I think it's because of all that walking and all that heavy lifting. Yepper. Yeah, I think I have probably 2 right now, which doesn't sound like a lot, but when you think about it, it is when you think about all the occupations out there. Letter carriers, USPS. And I've always had my handful of letter carriers. It's just always something that's coming along, Like I said, believe it or not, letter carriers and hairdressers, unrelated, I know, hairdressers get disabled a lot. A lot of postural back problems, sometimes feet, fingers, cramping. And I always wonder about those chemicals. I talked to my own hairdresser about it. And she's like, yeah, I would imagine so. It's a lot of wear and tear on the body. It's not heavy work, but it's constantly on your feet and hunching over people and using those fingers. The letter carrier business is a more heavier work, at least medium, I think. And don't they tell you that you have to be able to lift up to 70 pounds, or is it 50 for letter carriers? It's something pretty high. Jasmine Ruiz, a flower in the field of life. Very nice. Hello, I have a question. I get SSDI, disabled adult child benefit. Okay. I had SSI, but lost it when I got SSDI. That makes sense because your SSD was more favorable, right? Am I still eligible for Medicaid in any state? I recently moved to a new state. Okay. This isn't not something that we actually represent on because it's not part of what a a practice can viably do. But it's a little bit of knowledge here, Jasmine. If you go from SSI to DAC, and that increase in your income from SSI to the Social Security coming from DAC is the only reason why you are now making too much for Medicaid, there is a protective law against that. It's a beautiful law because now people don't have to be afraid to go after their DAC, right? That their parents worked hard for to get by the insurance. So there is a protection. And it's, again, only if the reason why you are not eligible for the Medicaid is due to the finances now that you get the DAC. Let's say you inherited $500,000 and it's sitting in your bank account. Then this rule isn't there to protect you. It's only if the DAC income is now too high when the SSI income wasn't. So it's just that limited protection, but really important. So make sure you follow up with that if you find that they make a mistake. Make sure that you flesh that out really well and make them aware that it's just DAC. And of course, you always have to worry about your income and your assets in most states with Medicaid. Not all. Some let you be rich and collect the Medicaid, but most don't. Bradley says, hi, Bradley. I was approved on the first try on my own. Good for you. SSDI 18 months, no more needed. Too bad I couldn't get reimbursed somewhere. What? I'm not sure I understand there, Bradley. I was approved on the first try. I know, it's 18 months. No more needed. What are you getting? I'm not really sure what you're talking about. Sorry, you might have to clarify that. Oh, spine surgery journey. Just started recon. Next week I get an electric stimulator. September 29th, scheduled third surgery, back surgery. Stimulator, does it help or hurt claim? I think, are you getting an implanted stimulator? I think that's what you're saying. I always point that out as nobody gets that unless they have serious pain. Doctors don't do it just because you're a hypochondriac. You know what I mean? There's got to be actual reason to believe, A, that there is the pain, B, there's objective evidence of that nerve problem being there. That's like an objective thing so that they can, and the stimulator will counteract that nerve perception or whatever. Yeah. So does your lawyer agree? I think spinal stimulator treatment, when they actually implant it, I think it's big. I jump on that. I shove it down their throat. Like nobody wants this machine in their body, but they will do it if their pain is bad enough and they want it relief. And to me, it's a big indicator of how bad your pain was. And that's the way I push that. Matthew says, I received the SSA 3373 function report from the SSA a few days ago. I'm intimidated on how best to fill it out because I have 35 disabilities, plus I sent 19 supporting evidence documents. Okay. You just got to do the best you can. Maybe try to do a page a day. You might need to get an extension. They'll give you another 10 days if you ask for it. Even if you don't, I think they will. We have a playlist function report, and it goes by number. So when you're on a particular number, Matthew, and you want to, let's say you're on number 5, maybe go watch those. It might give you some ideas of what is probably helpful to include, what would not necessarily be helpful, might be redundant. And most of the numbers we have covered. And remember, it's about your limitations, not so much reiterating your 35 impairments. It's about how they limit you for those, create the symptoms, limit your activities of daily living in all the different ways that they discuss there. So for every question, you kind of want to point out how you can't do that thing normal. Like, let's say you do have a dog and you feed it, but maybe you only feed it twice a week and your spouse does it the other 5 days because bending over into the bag to get the food out. I'm just giving you examples, but you want to emphasize what you don't do. You have to kind of explain what you do, but in a way that shows how you don't do it normal or fully or completely or timely. you know, or without help. Yeah, Matthew's also emphasizing that no 2 days are the same, right? That's true of probably everybody I ever deal with. So I would say I wouldn't even go for the average day. Maybe, if you have, I would go towards the worst days, unless they're rare. If 3 days a week are terrible days and you're in bed, those are the days I'd probably be focusing on. I might say somewhere every day is different, but this is a very big chunk of my time is like this. Because if we have those bad days, we can't do a 5-day work week in a job that we can't do it on those bad days because we'd be calling out sick 3 days a week. So sometimes we say, just pick an average day. I don't really know that that's the right answer, because an average day is going to make us look maybe moderately uncomfortable. But 3 days a week, we are bedridden, or hopped up on our painkillers that we don't know what's coming and going. Kimberly Colley, how are you? Nice to see you. Jay Vaughn, good morning. My court date got moved to November. Is there any way I can request an earlier court date? You can, but if you don't have the dire need circumstances that they do for expedition, you're probably not going to get it. And I would also say you've lost twice before, Jay. Maybe use this time. It's going to fly. I know you're probably starving and you're like, really need the money, but you want to make your case win this time. It's failed the last 2 times. So you want to use that, make the best of that time. Give that judge something that wasn't there for the adjudicators below and they denied you. So whether that's getting updated MRIs, you haven't been to a specialist in a year for that particular problem, get in there and get your complaints heard by all your doctors. So those medical records that you'll be getting to give to the judge before the hearing, before, say, 10 days before the hearing, use that time to make it strong. Because what's the point of rushing for a hearing that you're going to lose at, right? Just increase your chances as much as you can so that this is the end of it, right? That you prevail and you get to move on with your benefits. RD says, I am 56 and was a hairdresser for 38 years. What career would be transferable? I don't know. I have lifting, standing, and sitting impairments, 10-pound restriction. 10 pounds right there knocks you down, RD, to sedentary. So if the Social Security Administration agrees that the medical records confirm and they believe it to be true, that you can't lift more than 10 pounds, that puts you at sedentary. Your job is not sedentary, so now we know you can't do your prior job just based on that, because your job was at least light. And so I don't think those skills are transferable. And again, we're in that upper 50 range, so they know that we're a little clueless about transferring to other occupations. Any of those knowledge, pieces of knowledge we have, we might share them with family here and there, a little trivia, but could that transfer to a full-time job of transferring those skills? Probably not. So it sounds like you could have a good case there, RD. Beth Prince. Hi, Beth. What is the order that states process applications? I'm in recon, and when I called for status last week, and I was told they process initial first and all the recons. Crazy. I don't know that that's true. And I don't know who you called. You shouldn't be calling anybody back. There are people that work on recon and there are people that work on initials. So I don't know who told you what. If you called the field office, you're going to get what you asked for, which is probably misinformation or someone's perception in there, some clerk. But yeah, if I were you, I wouldn't be making those phone calls. Seriously, not if you have a lawyer, okay? Sometimes putting a cog in the wheel of the SSA is the thing you don't want to do. Then it gets pulled like, you just kind of want to let it keep moving, keep adding to it, So just be careful with that. And I don't really, that doesn't make sense to me. It's not true because initials are always coming in their front door. Recons are always coming in their middle door, right? It's constant. So I think that was just some dumb person that gave you that information. Rude Rabbit says, where are we at? 210. I got my E-stem implanted electric stimulator last year, spinal stenosis, DDD, which is probably degenerative disc disease, 3 bulging discs, all in lower back, 7 disc line. Due to potential issues, death, I rejected getting decompression surgery. Hurt my case? It depends. All surgeries have potential death and bad outcomes. So did you have a particular reason to think that you're at a higher risk than other people? If you did, I think it's really helpful to have that kind of expressed in the records. Dear doc, I just wanted to go over the potential decompression surgery. We discussed how high the risks were in my particular instance. And I told you how I wasn't comfortable with that excess risk. You're kind of like putting it in there, like, as far as I know, I'm at excess risk, not just the risk that everybody else is at, which, has I would say, they say surgery is always a risk of death. I mean, it just is, in general anesthesia. But obviously the percentage of people that don't make it is very, very low. However, it's still a risk. I know my husband was just put under last week, right? I think it's, if you can, get in writing from yourself to them or whatever, that you're reiterating your conversation that because of my particular health situation, I seem to have a greater risk than the normal surgical candidate for a bad outcome. We discussed death. We discussed the chance of the condition being worse. And given my comorbidities, the risk jumped a little too high for comfort. That really, because I have a video on this because they put out a ruling on this not that long ago about just saying, I don't want to risk dying, therefore I'm not having surgery. No one's going to make you have surgery, but they might find that to be a person who's willfully not pursuing all reasonable courses to get better. And they explain that. And this is why I'm saying, if you can get in there about how your understanding is you're at a bit of a higher risk than your average healthy person going for this surgery because of your comorbidities, it can help you maybe avoid the SSA being able to say that rule about not going for recommended ways to most likely feel better is a negative in terms of being perceived as non-compliance, or the pain is really not that bad for him because he doesn't even want to pursue the surgery, which is, the same risk as everybody else. If you could show or make it part of your evidence that you were at a higher risk, and that's why that you guys discussed your higher risk, then, I think it could be protective of that not being the accusation that's used against you, even if it's not overtly used. You know what I'm saying? You should really read that ruling, though. If I can find it, I'll tag it up here. I know I have a video on it, and I think it was a Social Security ruling. Or maybe it was a POMS. I don't know. It's been probably a good year. Bradley says, I was awarded SDI in Ohio, and never received back pay. Will there be multiple indefinitely now? SDI, do you mean SSI or do you mean SSDI? Do you mean Supplemental Security Income Welfare, or do you mean Social Security Disability? I think you mean the latter. If you did not receive back pay, were you owed back pay? You got an award letter and they will tell you what you're owed. And if they haven't paid you, I've seen them sometimes take, I don't know how long ago you won this, I've seen them drop the ball and the person's waiting for 6 months. And I'm like, if you're waiting more than 2 months, I would be on the horn with the local office. and they can message the payment office or whatever, because the local office doesn't pay the Social Security disability. The payment office does, which is usually in another state, but they can message them, you know. And then if you for sure know that you're due back benefits and that doesn't work, you know, after a certain amount of time, I would probably reach out to my congressperson. You know, you don't want that. That's a cog, you know, that's in there. If you're owed, that you need to get dislodged. And that's what the congressperson can do. They can't change whether you're owed anything, but if there's a cog blocking the progress or the processing, they can assist in getting that cog removed so the SSA can continue its work on your behalf. La Lulu says, former hairdresser and rural letter carrier. Wow. How's that for ironic, guys? Hairdresser and letter carrier. Wow, you got it all, girl. Woo. Yeah, I thought it was 70 pounds. That's a lot. That's a lot. Do you ever try to pick up a 40-pound bag of cement? It's so heavy. Also because of its shape, I suppose. I think if the 40 pounds was spread out, it'd probably be easier. I can't even do it. And they don't really sell them in little tiny things, not for much more money. So all that little cement artwork I wanted to play around with, play in the mud, if you will, I did. I wanted to do stuff in my backyard. Can't do it. All right. 6,000 foot Mike. How you doing, bud? I've been approved for SSDI. Yoo-hoo! At age 60, my SSDI attorney commented that my extensive medication list with oxygen and cardiac medications after cardiac arrest seemed to make winning SSDI favorable. Oxygen is very, I think it's being on oxygen. If someone is on oxygen I think it's a big one. I always drive that one home too. But I'm really glad you won. So that's good. Was that recent? I didn't know about that. Did I? Anyway, I'm glad for you. It's like a little pressure off you, right? Or maybe you did tell me. Yep. In California, it took 10 months from application to date of favorable decision. And I assume it was on initial or recon, right? You didn't have to go to hearing? Hey, Dimple. Better late than never, girl. Matthew, if I got the function report from SSA, does that mean I did not meet a listing? Or do people that usually meet a listing also get told to fill out the SSA? You know, they do look first to see if you meet a listing before they develop your RFC. However, I don't know that that means, because a lot of times they send out the function report before they even get all the medical records, and they need all the medical records before they can figure out if you meet a listing. So just the fact that you got the function report sent to you and you have to do it doesn't mean that you've already not met a listing, because they have to get all the medical records. And nowadays they don't wait to get the medical records and then send you the function report. They send it all out because they want, they want to move this case as fast as possible for you and for themselves, of course. So don't take that. The fact that you got the 3373 function report requested does not mean that they reviewed you and rejected you for a listing. For sure. Okay, Bradley clarifies. I was approved for SSDI on the first try, but never received back pay. It took 18 months to get approved. You're only... Oh, this is back in 07, Bradley? Yeah, probably it's water under the bridge at this point. You don't get back benefits unless there were back benefits months available. So if they awarded you and said, well, we know you said you were disabled 2 years ago, but we agree you're disabled, but we think it's only as of last month your evidence actually confirms it, you're not going to have any back benefits because you have that 5-month waiting period that you're not eligible for any benefits for. So it's possible you just didn't have any. It happens to a lot of people. It's very frustrating when they don't get to go all the way back to when they said they were disabled, eat up those 5 months waiting period in the past, and then have like another year at least where they get a big chunk plus their monthlies going forward. But it does happen. It's frustrating, but it does. Oh, you're welcome, Red Rabbit. He says, thank you for all you do and provide. I appreciate. Thank you for being here. It wouldn't be any fun without you guys. That's for sure. I love my Wednesdays. It's fun. Are we getting extra money? From who? I want my piece, Peter. Peter, don't be believing people who say you're going to be getting extra money, that they're going to hand out money, that money falls from trees or unicorns or, you know, anything like that. And I do know that there was sometimes something gets popped out in like a little anecdotal thing about, well, if we're saving money from cutting out some of the fraud, which they have, should they give it to the people? And most of the people say don't. Use it to get rid of our debt so that our kids and our grandkids and future Social Security people and everybody else, this mess that we built over the last 50 years can be fixed. So I don't know. I don't want to see, you know, if someone is going to placate me with a $500 stimulus check that is going to do zippo nil nothing for my future quality of life, I'd say no thank you. Please use it to pay down the debts of my kids and my grandkids and my, if I ever have any. You know, don't have to live with the problem we created. And I do believe my generation largely created it. Yeah. It wouldn't be from Social Security, I don't think, Peter, because that's all actuarially done with the amount of money we pay in. So I don't think so. I know they've made funny comments about it, but I don't know that, you know, when people talk about, well, we tossed this idea, but that doesn't mean they're doing it. That just means that it came up in discussion. And I like the fact that they do discuss various things, even the ones that end up being shot down as stupid, because you have to have those discussions. So we'll see, but I would be disappointed if they did that personally. Dimple's going to therapy in a couple of hours. Feel good. Kimberly Cawley, how do we deal with a physician that you've seen since the onset of pain, many, many years, that happens to also be a participant as a Social Security, get a different doctor, Social Security CE that I now feel has bias and has reluctance towards disability claim? Get a new doctor. You know, you don't have to stay with the same doctor. You're still going to get those records as part of your buildup of your case, right? But you know, you can get a different doctor. People change doctors all the time. You can do it too. Matthew says, I got my PFD for SSDI PFD in January of 2025. PFD. At that time, SSA said 7 to 9 months for an entitled decision. PFD. Oh, protective filing? Okay. I think that's maybe what you're saying. I had to finish it on paper app because online app locked me out. Then Madison, Wisconsin SSA office got it on. Okay. I'm not sure if there's a question there, Matthew, but it sounds like they finally got in the full. You're protected back to January, which is great. It's as if you filed in January, even though you didn't get all your stuff until May. That's good. At that time, Madison office said that nobody had been assigned to my case yet, but that I could send in supporting documents via fax. So does that mean the 7 to 9 months estimate for initial? No. An estimate just means that's something they have on paper. Like most of them are taking this. That means some are taking a lot longer. And if you don't have an adjudicator, then no one's working up your case. They haven't ordered the records yet. I would keep a running list of everything you submit. I believe you can submit those medical records. If you have them digitally in your device, you can go to your SSA.gov and upload them there potentially. I'm not sure you can. Yeah, I don't know at what point that comes in. It's warm in here. When you do get an adjudicator, keep a list of everything you said you sent in and keep copies, because they might never make it to that file. Just saying. Yeah, protective filing is just to protect your filing date so that your benefits before that date, should you have been found disabled before that date, can be paid as payable. If your SSD application date was May, then and they found you disabled as of May, you would have 5 month waiting period where you're unpaid. Going back to January, they can go back 12 months of benefits that could be paid you, should it be that they find you have an onset at least 12 months before then. So that's the beauty of the protective filing. It can actually save you many months of back benefits that would not be payable to you, even if you prove you were disabled during those months, because they never pay more than 12 months before the date of application. You got it clinched as of January instead of May. So that's good. That's good. So just because I received an SSA 3373 to fill out doesn't mean that somebody's been assigned to my case. No, I would say that usually comes from the adjudicator. Historically. Now, sometimes I'll see a cover letter where there's no adjudicator's name and it just says the DDS. So it makes me wonder if that DDS office is automatically shoving them out, even when there's not an adjudicator. But I don't think so, because they're just going to have to make you do one again in 6 months if it takes that long to get an adjudicator. So I do tend to think that there is an adjudicator if you get the 3373. That 3373 cover letter has a phone number on it. I suggest you call it and find out. Matthew says he understands how the protective filing date protects his back pay or when his application started. My question is, does it also hold? There isn't, no. It doesn't, because you never got your whole application. They couldn't ever push you forward. Like, you waited till May, not your fault, to get the rest of the paperwork in. That, all the same steps have to be taken. So they're not going to jump you ahead of someone else who had all their stuff in before you did. You know, adjudicator, even if your SSA office is the slow one, Matthew, and they don't get you processed and everything for 8 months, and then you get an adjudicator, the protective filing is only about what you just mentioned. It's not about giving you precedence over, you know, someone else who got their stuff in before you because they didn't have a protective filing date. You know what I mean? Oh no, ICP user. And then a name and a phone number. Yeah, just call. Just call. No, I know you didn't wait. It was all that blundering because their system shut you out. I totally get it. But the point is, it is the way it is. You don't get to, you know, the protective filing is for a totally different reason. Okay. All right, guys. I don't know that we have any more questions. Shall we call it a day? It's been about an hour and a half. I'll give you guys a couple minutes in case somebody does have some questions they want to pop in. Otherwise, we could just call it a day. It is a little warm in here. Anything else going on? Anything wild and crazy? Did you guys see there's new compassionate allowance? 13 new compassionate allowances have been added to the compassionate allowance list. I just did a video on them just to get them out there. It won't come out probably for a week or so. It's got to wait its turn, but I just wanted to get it done. You know, every year or so, new ones come out, and it's something that they take comments from the public about new and horrible conditions that are worthy of a compassionate allowance, you know, the criteria. And that's how they get a lot of these, and they investigate and they say, yeah, that needs to be, because someone who has that diagnosis by definition is disabled. It's not a matter of, well, how bad is your condition? It's not like when we have like back problems, there's, varying degrees. They're all like really usually complicated names, and complicated conditions, and usually very, very tragic. So we don't really want to be a compassionate listing, but if we are, at least we can get super, super expedited. You're welcome, Matthew. Kimberly, you're welcome too. Oh, it's crazy rain there, huh? We had a little bit of a storm earlier. Now it's a little overcast, but it's still really hot too. All right. I think we're good, guys, right? Oops, wait, there's St. Louis. St. Louis, right? Grande. I did not see that. That's interesting. I'm not sure what you're seeing. RD says, I have a question about menopause impairments. Is that a listing? Hormone studies show the last 20 years, women are concerned about hormones causing cancer and not taking them. I would say, no, that's not a listing. It could be an impairment, but it may or may not even be disabling. So of all jobs, right? I don't know. A lot of people don't need hormones at all. So far, anyway. And yes, I'm up there. Matthew, I did have one more question. If you have time, of course, for you. I have 2 surgeons in Wisconsin recommending heart surgery and a specialist in the Mayo Clinic that says I shouldn't have heart surgery yet. I don't know what your question is, but that's a lot of oh, I see where you are. Claire, I see you. I'll get to you in a second. Let me just finish with Matthew. Because of a discrepancy on CT scans, Wisconsin surgeon only using regular CT scan. The Mayo Clinic surgeon says that I need a gated CT scan because my aneurysm is not big enough for surgery. Well, I hope those 2 doctors are corresponding and discussing this, and that the better CT scans are sent to your old doctors, right? Then you can make your decision. That's scary, right? Claire says, self-employed. My prior work is 3 years, and those years my company was in redevelopment, no income, no money. How do I do job description? If there was no income, then you weren't working for pay. You saying you were working for free, Claire? I'm not sure what you're saying. Self-employed. All right. Self-employed, my prior work is 3 years. Oh, self-employed prior work. Your company, okay. No income, no money. Okay. So this is the thing about self-employed, and I'm self-employed also, Claire. Your activity, if the activity you're doing is, say, more than 45 hours or 45 or more hours a month during this no income, rethinking it all out, redevelopment or whatever. If it's under 45, then it's not SGA activity, and your income is clearly not SGA. And honestly, it's easier to win a case if you don't have prior relevant work than if you did. So if you didn't work full time, or you didn't put it, unless, I mean, redevelopment, were we just thinking about it, like if it's not substantial activity, it may be just thinking about it a lot, taking some notes. I don't even know if I would call that work. And if it is, now you're going to have prior relevant work, and those skills you had would have to be proven. You can't do that kind of thinking or whatever, not, redevelopment type efforts. Now, if redevelop means I was building houses and we were just building them all for 3 years, but there was no money, well, that's substantial activity. Obviously, that would be of value if someone else is paying you to do the same. So that's where the activity, even if you're not getting paid, can be substantial gainful activity, or substantial activity, I should say. And gainful in the sense that in the market, it would be paid for. It is of value. But if you weren't, and when you say redevelopment, you were kind of taking a hiatus and just doing a little bit of thinking here and there and pondering and researching, I would probably try to see if that does not really count as work. You're not going to get credits for it because there's no income taxes paid. So you have nothing to gain for it in terms of extending your DLI out. You got to look at your DLI. When is your date last insured? That's going to tell you when you have to have all your medical evidence created by. So, it's harder. You have to really think about a lot of things when it's self-employed. There's a lot of different I's to dot and T's to cross. All right. Bradley says, what are your thoughts on COLA? What about COLA? I think it's really important. Inflation means our money is always becoming not worth what it was last year. And everybody needs to have COLA on their Social Security and their SSI. There are some other numbers that they don't apply COLA to that they definitely should. For instance, the SSI resource rate of $2,000. It's been around for 40 years or something. $2,000 40 years ago is way, way more now. Yeah, if you have more than $2,000 today, you're not eligible for SSI welfare. So it doesn't make sense not to have COLA applied to everything. Everything. What do you think, Bradley? Otherwise, if like, let's say you have a $1,500 benefit today, that's now worth $1,400 something next year. So if the amount didn't change with COLA, you'd be down to pauperhood, even if you didn't work like a pauper and you paid in more than a pauper, right? RD says, yep, lack of hormones can cause depression and bladder issues. I'm sure that's true. For some reason, I don't really have that problem, but everyone's so different, right, RJ? Now, depression is an impairment. Doesn't matter whether it's because you go through something terrible or you have poor hormones. Hormones are, I mean, that is a physical possibility, but itself isn't going to be a listing. A listing, remember, is when you are automatically disabled because you just, meet the listing. And that's not that common. Most diagnoses don't meet a listing, even if they could have met a listing if their condition was worse, in the medical records. And bladder issues. Some bladder issues are disabling. Doesn't matter whether it's from hormones or anything else. If you have to be on the potty 4 hours in an 8-hour period, there's no job you can do full time, right? S. Lewis says 13 new compassionate listings is what I was referring to. Oh yeah, yep. It came out the 11th or the 12th, maybe the 11th. Yeah, all really, names I've never heard of. Well, the muscular dystrophy, there was 2 muscular dystrophy ones that everyone's heard about muscular dystrophy. So, but it's specific kinds that are compassionate allowance. Okay, Claire says it was like a startup, but we'd been in business since 1993. The business failed, end of 2019. I had breakdown, couldn't work. Oh, okay. If you haven't had income since 19, Claire, you probably are no longer insured for Social Security disability because you've not been paying taxes on earnings. So you'd have to prove that you are disabled under the rules before your DLI. You want to find out your DLI date less insured. And then hopefully you have very robust medical evidence before that date already existing, because the medical treatment you get now after DLI can't go to prove that you were disabled before your DLI. It can only prove that you're disabled today, but you're not insured today unless you can prove that you were disabled before you ran out of insurance coverage, okay? And when I say insurance, of course, I mean Social Security disability insured status, not health insurance or any other kind of insurance. Okay, Matthew's saying that the doctors won't talk to each other from different states. Okay, you get the medical records from Mayo and you send them to the other doctor. And you discuss it with them. They don't have to talk to each other. They're lazy anyway. They don't want to be spending time on the phone. Some of them anyway. Just say, this is what this doctor says. And then maybe go for a third opinion and show them both. This is what this guy says from Mayo. This is what, I don't know what to tell you, because I'm not a medical specialist or expert. But just because they won't talk doesn't mean that their records are not important considerations that they all should be considering. I mean, other opinions are very important. Not every doctor's perfect. They might have missed something. Or they'd be like, oh, yeah, maybe, So my question is, says Matthew, can I get penalized from the SSA where they can try to say that I should have had the heart surgery, even though I can't imagine, Matthew, that happening, that you get penalized for not doing the heart surgery when a medical doctor says it would be too risky and it wouldn't work? All you need is one guy. Now you've got a 50. I mean, that's a significant impact. It's not like you didn't have that guy and you did, and heart surgery is pretty intense. So I would submit it from everybody to the SSA. And I wouldn't be worried about that. This doctor says it's a higher risk than the other guy says. They can't hold you to ignore the Mayo Clinic guy who had the better CT scan system. No, they won't do that. Okay, not sure how to describe the job, works full-time. Well, then you're going to have a little problem, because your DLI is going to be done and your work activity is going to be counting as if you, depending on how you present this, you were working all that time, so you can't be found disabled at that time because you were working, even if you weren't getting paid. That's the thing about self-employment, because our activity, creating study content for architect license exam. I don't know what to tell you. If you were doing it full time, you were working full time, you weren't disabled, but you weren't making money, and now you probably don't have insured status. So, if you're able to work part time now and get that insured status back, you can do that. That's by earning those credits. I have a bunch of videos on that. If you believe now you can't work full time and you're not going to be, even if you work, remember, you can work part time, earning under SGA and still make enough to get all 4 credits for the year for insured status purposes. And it could take you anywhere from 1 quarter to 5 calendar years to get insured status back again. Probably something less than that if you hustle, because you do have the 5 years before that, and it's all within that 10-year window, a scrolling 10-year window. So, hey, Gemini. Filed disability in October 2024. Just received letter for consultative exam for physical and mental. Filed disability in 20. Had stroke in June of 2024. Okay, prior to applying. What's the time expected for approval? There isn't a time expected for approval. 60-year-old, stroke, diabetic, high blood pressure. There is really no time. They say, oh, well, we were taking 270 days, et cetera, et cetera. And you said time expected for approval. They don't give it that way. They say time expected or average time for a decision. It doesn't mean approval. So the approval is going to really depend on how you're doing now, what your medical records say. Are they good? Are they reflective? You have a good age bracket, so that's helpful. But so much is going to depend on the prior work and all that business to make sure you meet those 3 criteria. Okay? Or maybe you meet a listing, and then you don't even have to worry about the grids or anything. RD says, once you have your ALJ hearing, how long should you wait to get a decision? It used to be we'd usually go about 2 months. Now it's kind of a little up in the air, I'd say. Sometimes they're fast, sometimes they're slow. It depends on the decision raters. The judge doesn't rate the decision, he just makes it. And then they put it into a pool of decision raters, and they each it gets assigned to one of them, and then they, depending on what the judge wrote for his notes, like, I want a decision that supports this. And that's what they do. So are they fast? Are they slow? Do they go on vacation? How many other judges made decisions that are now also in that inbox? So there's a lot of leeways. But usually, I'd still say I would expect it within 2 or 3 months. Sometimes they come sooner, and sometimes 4 or 5 months. But usually I'd say 2 or 3. Oh, Claire says she did not receive credits, did not earn credits, you mean, since 2016, but worked with loan savings to rebuild. That's not tax paying. Remember, you didn't pay premiums for the insurance, so you don't have the insurance, unfortunately, Claire. If you're poor, you could maybe do SSI, but DLI was in 2021, but Palms doesn't care if you made dollars. They care about time they care about both. You have to have made and paid the premiums. And the only way you can pay the premiums is through the taxes on work earnings, because it's only for workers, and only for workers who pay the taxes, not those that work under the table or try to work but don't end up making any money. Sometimes we write off every business expense we had, so we don't have to pay taxes. And then the repercussion is we didn't buy the insurance because we didn't pay for it. And so that's the rub on that. Sometimes I say, don't write off every expense that you could possibly think of so you can, save money from being paid to Uncle Sam. And I get that. I'm self-employed. But my big goal in life was to have a healthy Social Security benefit for when I retired. Because when I can't work anymore, I want that money coming in my door. The reason why the time is important is because if you're working full time, even if you're not getting paid, you cannot say you're disabled from working full time or substantial. So you yourself said, yeah, I was working full time. Wasn't getting paid, but it means that you're not unable to do that kind of work, even if you don't collect a paycheck for it, right? You see what I'm saying? It's the substance of whether you were disabled or not. Aside from the fact that you also didn't get the credits, which is unfortunate. And you're not the only person that's made that mistake, for sure. People don't know about how the system works. They don't teach it to us when we come out of high school. I wish they did. Some sort of basics. Can't leave workout because tax. I'm not sure what the rest of your statement is, Claire, because tax. Okay. I will scroll back up, guys. Claire is saying that her onset that she's alleged is 11 of 2019. Okay, so you have insured status there. But if you're also saying that you were working full time, just not collecting a paycheck between 2019 and 2020, it's hard to say that you were disabled from working any job because you actually admit that you were working, if that's what the facts are here. I'm not sure I've got them all straight. So I'm just saying this kind of generally. Besides mental health, my physical health deteriorated. COVID right after onset, no work, no doctors. Then in 2022, impairments explode. That all started before 2019. It was progressive. Yeah, and most of us are progressive. It's true. Unless we get hit by a Mack truck, it tends to be progressive. You're going to have some difficulties because you're saying you started getting problems by 19, but you admit that you weren't disabled from working back then, even though you put that down as your onset. It doesn't really make sense, you know? It's not when you started to have problems. It's when they became disabling and you could no longer do those activities that constitute substantial activity. All right? I'm sorry, Claire. If there was a way you could earn like $7,500 a year this year and then like about that a little bit more next year and get those credits back, then you could do the SSD thing. But if you're poor, you can do the SSI because that doesn't require any of these credits. That's just the welfare program. But you have to be poor enough. That's in terms of resources and in terms of income coming through the door from you or from a spouse. All right. I know I skipped over some people. All right. Gemini. Okay, we already talked to you, right, Gemini? Okay. Mama. Late to the chat. Yes, you are. Just kidding. But I was wondering if cases are pulled by date filed. What do you mean pulled? I don't know what that means. Drip fam. Thanks for all your help, ma'am. Oh, you are welcome, Drip. Nice to meet you. RD. Yeah, I look forward to Wednesdays too. Truly. I truly do. Okay, Gemini says, what happens when they request a CE for mental and physical 60-year-old stroke? I do have a couple videos on kind of getting you familiar with the consultative exam and things to look out for. If you want to look at them, Gemini, I think if you just do a search, the playlist might even be consultative exam or something like that. I think it's a playlist. But yeah, it shows you what to expect from the mental and the physical because they're a little different. Matthew says, since I don't have a lawyer and I've already handed in all of my medical records, now that I have new medical records from a new heart surgeon at the Mayo Clinic, should I send that to the adjudicator? Yes, but always, you better have kept a copy of everything you sent to the SSI because stuff goes missing, Matthew, and you don't want to be without it because sometimes it's hard to get records back again, right? I mean, sometimes the provider doesn't have them anymore. They say, oh, it's been 7 years, we destroyed them. It's horrible, but so I would just keep a copy. And then plus, if they never sent it up to the DDS, you'll be able to do that again. Virginia, long time no see. Oh, may God bless you. Have a great one. Thank you. I appreciate it. Claire, you're almost 63. Okay. Yeah, it doesn't really change any of what we're talking about, but you can also do the early retirement, but then you take that big nasty discount, right? RD, you're welcome. Okay. Clara says that she did make a little in 23, 24, but totaled 5 credits. So not enough. Well, do something different for 2025. Get 4 more. And get 4 more in 2026 if you can. You know, you could do it in any way. You don't have to be through that business that you had. It could be through a temp agency. It could be through a part-time for disabled people, giving seniors jobs. It could be whatever it is. When someone gives you cash for doing something, whether you're house sitting or not, record it, pay taxes on it, deposit in the bank so there's like proof that you actually received the money. And then when you file your return, declare that. Yeah, you got to pay taxes on it, but it could, be helpful. Now you've got limited time in a way, kind of, because you're going to be 63, but full retirement age isn't until about 67 now. So it depends, Glamour Girl, I feel like it's been a while. Hello, Attorney Joy. How is DLI calculated? Yeah. If a person stops working in July of 2022, do they start counting covered years starting January 2022 or 2023? Okay, so if you made enough money in 2022, Glamour, for all 4 credits for 22, it doesn't matter whether you earned them in the first quarter of 2022 or spread it over the year before you stopped working in July. That'll be the 4 credits for 2022. Assuming you have all the credits going back for quite some time, you'll have 5 calendar years, and your DLI will be December 31st of 23, 24, 25, 26, 27. So if you ended in July of 2022, but you've been earning all 4 credits every year, including that year, you'll have until December 31st, 2027 as your DLI. Sometimes I have to really chart it out if people had spotty. Some years they didn't earn all the credits. Some years they did. That can affect when your DLI is. And you can always call the SSA and find out your DLI. 800-772-1213. You can also call your field office. Matthew has a last question. In my last question, I misspoke and said I handed in all my medical records. What I meant to say was that I filled out the 3368, which includes all medical providers and relevant tests, etc. Good. That's good. And they're supposed to order them for you. So Bradley says, has the calculation for SSDI changed over the years? As far as Dakota, I was referring to the proposal. Oh, COLA. As far as COLA. COLA does apply to Social Security, retirement, and disability, and to SSI in some shape or form. The SSDI calculation has not changed. And I hope it doesn't, unless it's going to be more beneficial, I suppose. But it's going to also have to be solvent, so we can't just be silly about it, right? Yeah, the amount we get is based on, they have a narrative on it. There's bend points and certain amount of income you're going to get. It's going to build it. It's kind of complicated, but they do have it at the SSA.gov site, and they talk about the bend points, and from when you make up to this, it's going to be this, and how they calculate what your benefit's going to be. Bradley says SSDI, not SDI. Yeah, I know. I kind of got it once we were getting into it there, Bradley. Okay, so Claire, it sounds like, give the case a shot, but it does sound like you have some uphill battles to deal with that might not be surmountable, but it's worth trying. And you are eligible for early retirement. You will take like a 30-35% hit off of your monthly income forever for that. But sometimes we got to do what we got to do. I don't know what your financial situation is. Maybe you have a spouse who can earn, or you guys can hold off with you not taking Social Security until 67 so you get the full amount. Or if you can wait till 70, then you get like a 30-something% bump up from that. So it's hard. I know. I'm sorry what's happened to you. And I know self-employed, it's hard. We don't work, we don't get paid, right? Tell me about it. Sometimes when we work, we still don't get paid, right, Claire? We both know that. Crystal K. Hi, everybody. Hi, Crystal. Good to see you. Claire, consults are they're not cheap, but you're welcome to it if that's what you want. At the top of the chat, there's a link to the page that explains about consults if you're interested. But it's not they're not a drop in the hat. Let's put it that way. Gemini says, so the medical records were not enough info, so they're asking for CE exam. What happens after that? Do my time start over for them to make a decision? No, it doesn't start over. Usually what happens is they say, historically they've kind of said, we get the CE exam when we think it's possible they could be disabled, but their medical records do not give us what we would need to find that. So we want to give this extra opportunity at our expense, the SSA expense, for them to be examined by our doctor. That's the theory behind it. That's usually the last step, unless something of magnitude they've been alerted to that your new medical records are going to show something really soon, like you just went for an MRI and they want to wait for the MRI result. Otherwise, usually the CE exam is not scheduled until after they've gotten your medical records, so that once the CE exam comes in, they can send everything over to the medical expert, and he's going to look at the CE results and your medical doctor's records and determine what your residual functional capacity is, your RFC. And then once they do that, they ship it back to the adjudicator, who then takes the rule on the RFC, and if it, under the grids, it'll say if you're mandatorily disabled or if it's a framework, and they'll decide whether everything kind of points to disability under the law. Crystal K says, won my reconsideration SSI, but they gave me a start date of February 2025. Well, you said SSI. I think you mean SSDI, maybe? My 55th birthday rather than when I applied in January 23. Yeah. Well, I guess either way, yes, you got deprived of a nice back benefit check, right? That's so frustrating. I know. Ugh, it's very frustrating. Crystal K, my attorney and I are appealing the start date of disability. I think you told me this maybe last week, Crystal. How long do you think it's taking the appeal process? Oh, it could take many, many months. You're appealing the onset. They can look at everything, and hopefully your records still show that you're disabled, or else they could flip it on you. I mean, the stuff that applied back then, if you could find something that they were missing from back then that would show that you were more disabled than what the records they feel represented, go through that with a fine-tooth comb and see if there was anything that, they didn't have Dr. Jones records, That's what I would hope to find. Because they seem very resistant to flipping it without that. I don't know what you're saying, Mama. Looked at by order received. Crystal K says, also, is it common for SSA to not pay your monthly benefits while waiting for the appeal to happen? Oh, no. You should get your benefits. Yep. The whole time you're appealing. You won. That win is what's going on now. Your appealing isn't going to stop that. So, is it common for us to not? No, you should be getting your, February, March, onset was February, March, April, May, June, July. You weren't owed anything for those months. That's why you weren't paid for them, but you should be owed for August, which would be paid to you probably in September, because there's a 1 month, you have to survive August to be due August, right? So, it's not that they weren't paying you. You weren't owed anything under what they found. If they go back and they find that you were indeed disabled a lot earlier, you will get a bunch of back benefits for those months. And obviously your lawyer's hoping for that, so he can get paid for his hard work. Okay, Claire says, I'm not clear on why you think there's no case based on what I said, and only based on what you said, Claire. I don't know your case other than what you said. Trying to figure out if you understand what I'm saying. Yeah, you said that in 2019, if this is true, you said I was working full time. I just wasn't making any money in that redevelopment of, I think that's what you said. I know we have a bunch of scattered all over the place. if you were working during that year or for any length of time after, where it canceled out any potential disability because now you're doing that substantial activity, showing that you weren't actually disabled from doing substantial activity, that's why you would have difficulties with the case. It's just based on those facts. If we're able to be active and productive, then we're not disabled, right? If we are able and doing it. So that's what I'm alluding to. It's you have a complicated situation for sure. And self-employed is always more complicated. We have to really, it takes a lot of time to kind of like really dissect it. The issue is, Claire, because you said you were working that whole time, redevelopment. And I said, well, you're just like thinking about it and not really, or were you doing active business building things that would be of value in the regular market if you were hired by somebody else to do those? And that's what I thought you said you were doing as you were trying to redevelop your business. So even though you didn't make money, you said somewhere here that you were working full time to do it. And that's where I got that sense from. But it could be that we got missed stuff in the typing mix here. So always take that as a caution. Okay. Crystal K says, my medical records now show worse symptoms, so I'm not concerned of being denied during the appeal process. Good for you. I mean, not good for you, but good for your case, Crystal. Thank you, Stephanie, answering all my questions. Oh, you bet. Anytime, Crystal. Oh, you got your back pay. Oh, was this SSI or SSD? So they found you, if it was SSD, they had to have found you disabled 6 months before February 2025. Your back benefits went from February 2025 to whenever they paid you, right? That's good. It's a little something. Okay. Well, good. I'm glad you got a willing and able attorney and that you guys are on the same page. Okay. Clara's clarifying that she stopped work end of 2019. Okay. And your DLI is not till 2021. So as long as you have really, really robust, you got 2 years in the past that you can really focus on. So that's good. And it sounds like 23, 24, you maybe didn't make SGA, so even though you worked a little bit. So that's good. That can still be smooth sailing with your case. So I could have sworn I thought you had said something about the last 3 years. So I don't know. But anyway, just when in doubt, make the claim, I think. If they'll definitely boot it out if it's not viable. But if you stopped working totally at end of 19, and you had all of 20 and 21, and you were treating really for the physical and the mental, and you were in your late 50s at that time, you could have a good case. Definitely. It's definitely worth fighting for because you paid in for that, We're doing well. He's doing better. Thank you, Crystal. SSI. Okay. That makes sense because there is no 5-month waiting period for payments for SSI, Crystal. So that's good. Yeah, 55th birthday. Okay. Gotcha. The question is, Clara says, 2017 to 2019 is my past relevant work, but it was in, okay. It was in redevelopment, no income. That means you didn't earn any credits, but you admit that if this is what you're saying, I worked hard, I worked full time between 2017 and 2019, but it was a bust. It's hard to claim that you're disabled if you're able to do all that hard work you're talking about. That's what I'm saying. It's substantial activity. It's like if someone's doing downhill skiing, they're not making money, but they're doing very robust activity. It's going to be hard for them to prove that they're disabled when they're doing that, even though they didn't make any money. You follow? So the income is not the only defining factor. We could be earning nothing, but if we're out there, working, we're still able to work. It shows what we're able to do. It's demonstrative of not severe impairments that would render us unable to do the things we were just doing. Now, maybe 2019, you know. And what I would say too, redevelopment, and again, I don't know exactly all that is, but it sounds like very brainiac work, Claire, like super smart. Your mental health problems could be assistive in showing that you can't transfer those brainiac skills, because normally brainiac high skilled work is harder to win under. You know, the high income earners that tend to have the higher skilled work, it's harder for them to win disability. But if you have mental health treatment that shows concentration was off, focus, you know, for whatever reason, you know, emotionalism, tearful, depressed, not getting out of bed, can't focus, can't even remember anything, blah, blah, blah. A lot of things that come upon us. That will help you under the grids, because you have to prove that you can't transfer those skills to a less physical job. Can't do that prior job. That would be proven by mental health records showing that you became mentally unable to do that high skilled, concentrating kind of work. Amongst other things, mental, like could be dealing with people, you know what I mean? So that's what you'd probably be focusing on. And then, of course, as a late 50s, you just have to prove that you can't do medium or heavy work. Can't do your prior job. Can only do at best light work, which also includes sedentary. So even if you could do those two, if that's the most you can do, and you can't do your prior job for whatever reason, could be mental, and you can't transfer those skills, could be mental, you can win. And you got to do it on that. The medical evidence has got to be before 2021. The stuff that the medical evidence you're doing now with treatment is important, but not to meet question number one, which was she legally disabled before 2020, end of 2021? That's the first question. If they find that to be so, then they look at the remaining, say, and has it continued to the present? Okay, don't give up. We're getting there, Claire. Celentria. Hi there. I feel like I'm really overthinking the function report work history. Is it true that you offer to evaluate review? I would love if you can help for sure. I do. It's not that cheap, but you can go check it out. At the top of the, well, if you go to joydisability.com, the link on the upper right is for the paid consultations. Yeah, I help people, you know, understand the question, explain their answer thoroughly, responsively, you know, a way that's going to be clear as to what they are trying to say. If you need help typing it, you can do that also. We have like form fillable, so you can type right in it. Or if you have difficulty with that, I would do it for you. If you have a cover page that has the barcode and the cover letter that has the fax number to send it to, I could fax it in for you. You know, definitely help facilitate that, as well as of substance, helping you get what you're trying to say in those spots and making sure you understand what's important to think about when you're answering that question. You know, sometimes people don't think about certain things. They're like, oh my God, I didn't even think that would be. And I'm like, yeah, that would be something to include here. Gemini. Thank you. Oh, you were so helpful. Much blessings. You too. It can be overwhelming and confusing. I know. Hope after my CE, I received my warm letter. I hope so too. Fingers crossed, Gemini. The onset. Okay, that's good, Clary. Onset is after those 3 years of redevelopment. Okay, so we're getting closer with our facts. So sorry if that got you all worried. It is hard when we're doing scrolling back and forth and questions come up in between, but I hope we have it a little more clear now from what you've been telling me, and kind of have the structure all figured out. Sounds like you know, if you were treating during those years before 2021, you've got those 2 years to really get that stuff together and present it. It is harder when it's a remote DLI like that, but it's certainly not impossible. If you have the goods, you just can't add to them now. That's the problem. Can't go back in time, right? Oh gosh, Bradley, I don't know what the maximum SSDI is for 2025. Is it like 4,000 now? For the higher ones that paid in more? Probably close to it, right? I could look it up. I think I can look it up fast. Let's see. This one just gives me a ballpark too. Yeah, it's something around 4,000. But that's not the exact amount. Let's see. Because, of course, it went up 2.5% from the prior year, right? I'm just seeing if I'm not even on the official site here. Eligible individual. No, that's not helping. Yeah, it's something like that. I'm sorry. I don't have the SSA page in front of me. It didn't pop up very readily for whatever reason. You'd think that would be the first one to pop up, but no. Ridiculous, huh? But yeah, the highest for someone who's paid in at least what that maximum cap is for much of the years that they've been an adult earning, that would be what they'd be getting. Okay. Yeah, don't worry, Claire. Don't panic. Mama says, if I applied in July, am I in line to have my case looked at, assigned to someone that looks at it and makes an initial determination? Yes, you're in line. Everybody gets in line. And it's different. Every office is different. If you have, too many cases at your office that there's like a big amount waiting for an adjudicator, and the adjudicators are all booked, and then when they get a few that they scroll out and make decisions on, and a few more come in, because I'm sure they all have some sort of level of limit beyond which they don't assign them more cases. I would like to think, yes, the people that have been in line since June would come before the people in July. Once they got to that, they have to get to the DDS first. Now there are some that get expedited or take priority. That could be a disabled veteran, 100% P&T. That could be a terminally ill person. That could be compassionate allowance, but that should go really fast. Sometimes if someone is about to, usually this is for hearings though, if they're going to be evicted and have no place to go but be homeless, they don't have family or friends, or they're going to lose their they're going to get foreclosed on with a mortgage, that can potentially be a dire situation where they will expedite. But that doesn't really necessarily always work. I've seen those take a long time. I've seen veterans wait 100% P&T, even though they're supposed to be kind of prioritized. Claire asks if I didn't see doctors because of COVID hindrances, do they disregard that? It's not that they disregard it. It's just that you don't have evidence. They can't award you because of imaginary evidence. So if you didn't see doctors during 2019, 2020 and 2021, and there were doctors, it depends on your area, I'm sure. I'm probably in a little more urban area. Maybe, I don't know. It's not that they're penalizing you. You just don't have the goods. They can't just go and imagine that everybody that lived through COVID is disabled, even though they don't have any evidence, just because they claim it. You follow? It just doesn't work that way. So presumably you did get some visits in there. I think if you got some, which everyone could get some, the doctor's offices weren't closed beyond a short period, then I think they might understand that you didn't have like 4 months of physical therapy in the middle of COVID, because these probably weren't happening. Any kind of therapy was probably limited to people who were really going to die without it, maybe like cardiac therapy or something, right? Not just those of us with bad backs or whatever. So it's not a disregard of COVID hindrance, but it doesn't replace the fact that if you have no evidence, you have no evidence. How can they, literally, all of us could then apply and say, I was disabled then, give me money. I just couldn't go because of COVID. Do you see what I'm saying? Like, it's that whole life is not fair thing. Oh, Matthew, you're talking about the barcode on your function report? On the first page of the function report, where you write down your name and your address and do you live with family, and the first page of the questions. they now put the barcode right on that page in the upper, I think it's the left. It's a barcode. One of those funny little doodads. That is the one that you're going to have on the top page if you're going to fax it someplace. And then your cover letter where they said, please fill out this function report, is where they have the phone number at the bottom, usually with an extension and a fax number for the adjudicator office. Sometimes the adjudicator's name. It's kind of like a QR code. I get a little confused on these, Matthew. I'm not entirely techie, but if we're talking about the function report, it's in the top of the first page of the function report, the barcode. The phone number for the adjudicator is going to be on the cover letter. They say, please fill out this form. It's a letter that you got. Claire asks, Crystal asks, sorry, are appeals held online or in person? I'm in Oregon. They are online, generally speaking. I know with recon, you can ask for that formal thing with the hearing officer, but we don't do that. If it's a hearing, because you're going to an ALJ hearing, then that would be online or in person, whichever one you pick. Personally, I think you should do online. It's much easier. Claire says, but 2022, so many dogs is just after the DLI links impairments. Well, you know, if you have a ton in 2022, Claire, and you have a little thinner in 2021, 2020, I do think one can make the art, as long as you have something. If you went for 2 years and didn't see anybody, then you have no evidence that anything started to get significant before 2022. But if you have some, it might be the argument that this office was closed. Maybe you can even get the proof that they closed. If they didn't close and you just didn't go, well, then that's not going to work for you. But by the way, your DLI links, your DLI does not have to, your impairments do not have to be linked to 2019 per se. They have to be linked to some time before your DLI, which was 2021, right? So hopefully you got some 2021 and 20, even if you didn't get like the first 6 months of 2020 because of COVID and then everything started opening up again, hopefully you got a decent amount in 2021. You know, a little bit. So maybe some diagnostics, MRI. Yeah, it's hard when we have mental health problems and we don't get out of bed and we don't get it treated because there's no evidence of that even happening. You know, what's that thing? There's a bear, you know, in the woods. If nobody's there to see it and you have no evidence, I mean, talk is cheap. You just got to remember that they cannot just assume everyone who says, believe me, the whole world, 90%, maybe 80% of people who would like to just collect money and not work would be saying it. And that's why they have to have something. But if you had some, Claire, I mean, if you're stuck in bed, did you call the hospital? Did you go to the ER for you know, being so depressed that you can't even function? I mean, that's a hospitalization worthy thing if it occurred, you know. Yeah, and the history is helpful for perspective, so use it, but they can't find that you're disabled today based on the fact that you were not disabled but had some mental health impairments before. You just got to go get every crumb you can and then cross your fingers, submit them all, you know, the old, the new, whatever was in 2020 and 2021 and 2019. You know, 2019, there was no COVID. I mean, it's called COVID-19, but nobody was sliding south on it. So when you were starting to get bad in 2019, did you treat then, right? Gina says, we're at 2 hours and 20 minutes. Am I able to file based on mental as well as physical limitations? Do I have to pick a lane? No, you want everything. Everything. A hurt pinky finger. Put it in there, Gina, because it all works together to disable me. Yeah, they have to consider each and every one singularly and in combination. Because one might take you out of the high-skilled jobs because you can't focus because of the mental health, but the other one is the bad back, so you can't do the simple jobs that you could do notwithstanding the mental health limitations, but you can't do it because they're too physical. So it all comes in together, so don't leave anything out, in my opinion. Yeah. Referrals, they're referrals. Okay. Matthew, it looks like on page 3 of 10 of the SSA 3370 that there is a long rectangular barcode, not just with lines, but also with the little black and white dots. I Google it and it says this is a barcode. Yeah, I think that's what we call a barcode. It's in the upper left, right? Of page 1 of your function report, of the actual function report. Bradley says, how long does it take to hear back from Social Security on a CDR? The world's your oyster on that one, Bradley. Sometimes it's like they close it up and they don't even tell the person it's over and they're fine. I see people all the time say, well, they made me fill this out and I never heard back. And now it's 2 years later. And I don't know if mail got lost or if they just, I don't know. I really don't know. Gemini. Matthew, you can call and they will send you a page with the barcode. Well, I think Gemini, he has the function report, has the barcode with it. I think that's what he was talking about. Mama is in South Carolina. It was given a California address to send documentation to. Was it to send the records to? Is it a fax? Are you faxing them or are you going to mail them? Keep a copy, whatever you do. Yeah. So Claire's just talking about she had a long history, even back when she was still able to work. She had some mental health struggles. That, of course, is showing that you are not disabled by your mental health. So then the question is there some point where the medical evidence shows that you were? And that's what your goal is. So if you're saying you saw nobody in 20 and nobody in 21, and then your DLI is 21, I think it's going to be a struggle. But maybe your physical could do it. Here's the thing, too, Claire. If you had physical, did you go to the doctor for physical stuff? Did you have any physical therapy? If you, at your age, you don't have to prove that you're hospital-worthy mental health. You just have to prove you can't do your prior work, whether it's from mental or physical, doesn't matter, or combo, and that you can't transfer those skills to a different job that you could that they would say you could physically do, like a sedentary, sitting, easy job. If those skills are not transferable because of your mental health problems that are clear. I mean, that's why I say, even though you've got some issues, you still got to pursue the case because it could be it all kind of goes just enough. You know what I mean? And you only know that by looking at each, and we could talk here till we're blue in the face, but until you look at each and every date of definitely the medical evidence before your DLI and after your onset, yeah, that's what you got to do. I know it's not easy. Yeah, you're welcome, Gina. All right, guys, let's call it a day. I'm starting to get a little raspy here. All right, Crystal, you got one last in. I was thinking online would be easier too, LOL. I have seizures triggered by many issues, but overstimulation is a huge trigger for my seizures. Yeah, if you're talking about an ALJ hearing, we love the online. We really do. I feel like judges do too. Now, when they were able to do them from home, they might have liked it even more. There was the rare judge maybe that didn't. They were not very tech comfortable. But, and it doesn't always work. Sometimes you have to revert to phone or something. But it is nice that nobody has to be driving. Risks on the road. Sometimes disabled people have trouble driving, or they don't have money to get a ride, or, could be a ton of things. But it saves us a lot of time, that we used to spend going to hearings. And I'll tell you, it's a lot more gets done. Yeah. They're not necessarily going to be talking about the specific business skills of that particular niche business, Claire. It could be, does she know how to, I don't know, filing or alphabetizing or, things like that. So it's not necessarily the specifics, but there is rules that discuss you shouldn't be expecting someone who's 58 to just hop over to a whole new industry and be able to transfer those skills. So you have that in your favor. But that's after you've gotten your You got to get your RFC down to light to sedentary based on the evidence prior to your DLI. So you have to have some physical evidence of that. And sometimes something from before can, let's say you had an MRI in 2019 or 2018 that showed severe cervical stenosis or lumbar. That's not going to just miraculously disappear. So you could get a judge that's like, well, we see the MRI from 2019. That's before her onset. However, that stuff doesn't get better. So she has stenosis, even though there's no MRI done in 2020 or 2021. So some of those things can kind of be extrapolated to the present. Gina says, wait, I had one more. Yeah, I saw you. Charles Lewis. Hi, Lewis. I wonder if we're related. Just kidding. Hello from El Paso. Thanks for all the great info. You are so welcome. My CDR diary date was April 2020 this year. Haven't heard anything yet. Are they often late? Yes, very often. Yepper. So I would expect it. Just keep on top of your follow-ups with all your same people that you saw before, or same type of doctors you saw before. Oh, Gina says she asked. Oh, I don't know. Crystal K. Yeah, I hear you, Claire. You just got to push forward and do that claim and try to get everything. You know, talking about 1991 isn't really going to help. I get it, though. I've been self-employed since late 90s. And yeah, me going to someone else's workplace, never going to happen. Not going to happen. Crystal says, kudos to you, Stephanie, for being so quick and responding to all these different scenarios. Oh, I'm trying, right? Gina says, if I'm diagnosed with something notoriously difficult to treat, something poorly understood by clinicians like a connective tissue disorder, how do I prove that? It's hard. So you want to try to get the best specialist you can and the most sympathetic primary care. You want to go to a connective tissue specialist, if you can. Would it be rheumatology sometimes? There's a lot of those cases. So you're not alone, but you definitely want to you want to have your complaints constantly going in your medical file. They're constantly telling your doctor about what's going on. So it's not like every 6 months there's a complaint, you know, when you happen to see him. The limitations are from what you tell your doctor, what your doctor observes. If you say, I walk with an intelligent gait and he sees that and he puts it in his record, it's kind of medical evidence now. His observations, he should be recording what you're complaining about. Now, that's technically not medical findings, but it lends itself to be helpful in a different fashion because you were historically, there's evidence that you've been complaining about this for so long, so it makes it more credible as opposed to just suddenly now complaining. So you want to just, if you haven't been a complainer before, now's the time, and pursue everything with specialists. And just, let's say you have a connective tissue disorder and it causes pain. You might also have musculoskeletal impairments. So I would suggest getting them worked up if you do have, say, back pain, separate and aside from with like MRIs, because even though it's, you know, you have the connective tissue disorder, maybe that's seropositive, it's hard to quantify it. But if you also have, now you have an MRI that shows that you have stenosis and a impinged nerve. Do you know what I'm saying? So you're kind of getting double on there. And sometimes when the more illiterate medical professionals that are not good in a particular area, and same true with maybe adjudicators, you know, that can help put a more objective spin on it. Yeah, but I also have this. So, and then, you know, other things are going to matter, like your vocational profile. It's really big, important. Okay. Yeah, Claire. So it's, and I follow what you're saying, and I believe everything you're saying. Unfortunately, it can't be just from your mouth. It's got to be from the therapist from the relevant time period. So you got to go get those records. It's just something you have to do. Okay. Gina says that the rheumatologist said there was really no significant way to treat what I have. That's right. Then you're going to follow up and keep following up every 3 months with your specialist so they can monitor to see if it's gotten worse, gotten better, medications, all that, because that will prove that you still have it and that it's still bothering you. Sometimes people say, I'm not going to go to the doctor because I can't do anything about it and nothing works. That's fine, but now you have no evidence that it's still bothering you. So, and it's medical evidence, not just what we say. Medical evidence is first and foremost. We can't win without the medical evidence. They can't make a finding of fact without the medical evidence. Certainly not a diagnosis or a severity. And they didn't have anything else they could do for me, so I guess I should report everything to my parents. Well, did the specialist say you have this horrible connective disorder, but we're not going to even follow you? Usually when we have a significant disorder, even if there's no cure, we get followed. They take blood work every 3 months or 6 months or something like that. What about something like that? Do it for the simple case of now your complaints are going to be with your specialist. They're going to show up in the records a year later. That, in August of 2025, Gina was complaining about how she can barely get out of bed in the morning and it takes her 2 hours and she's so stiff and she's unstable on her feet and she's at a risk fall. That's where that stuff comes from. So, even though they can't cure you, it's the monitoring, the following up so that you can keep explaining what's going on. They can keep doing blood tests. It'll continue to show up as a positive blood marker if it is seropositive. And if there are any kind of musculoskeletal pains that might also have another cause on top of it, like I mentioned before, getting those diagnostics are really, really important because they speak a lot. They're very objective. Gina, I've been referred to a pain specialist, but my hearing is in a few months. Does it matter that these records will be very, very recent? You want them. It's good. It's before the hearing. They're admissible. Get them. Get them, Gina. Get your butt to that doctor. To answer your question, they did extensive blood work and then more blood work on top of it. And they said there's no cure or even treatment. That's fine. So in a year from now, you no longer have that condition, at least not officially, because you're not getting treated for it or followed. The following. They should have, most specialists are like, well, we'll do blood work every year and see where it's at. Because at some point it could get so bad that you have to go in a hospital. How are they going to know? I mean, I don't know what the specifics are of your case, but, and I would, do you do your own research? Is it true that there's no help for it at all? What about no cure, no making it better, but something that helps prevent it from being worse? But that follow-up is proof. It's evidence that it's still as bad as it was, right? If you don't go back, there is no evidence that it stayed bad. You could be doing the dancing jig every Friday night at the nightclub. You know what I mean? Because there's nothing to suggest that you have a problem. So you got to keep the follow-up, guys. Contrazy. Hi, I've been waiting. Contrazy. That's a cool name. I've been waiting 190 days from the first ALJ meeting. Then 6 weeks since second ALJ meeting. Oh, you had 2 hearings, huh? That was 8 minutes of talks. How long should I be waiting for a decision? Could be a few months. There's no set time. They don't have a deadline on themselves, but they do have bosses that look down and say, oh, your doc, this decision is 5 months old. But usually it's in less time than that. John says, are we getting a raise this year? Every year, John, as long as there is a upward, how do I explain this? There's COLA applied every year. If we have a very stagnant economy, COLA can be 0. We had that in 2010, 2011, I think 2015 under Obama, at least a few years we had that kind of problem. But, it's kind of like the opposite problem from having hyperinflation. It's like stagflation. But I would anticipate, you're going to get another little couple percents or whatever, 1.5%, whatever it is, whatever the inflation supposedly is. Of course, it never seems to really keep up with inflation, right? We have big problems with how our COLA, the consumer price index upon which it is based, seems a little not realistic. Matthew says, thanks so much again, Stephanie. Have a great, blessed rest of your day. You too, Matthew. Good to see you. Gina says, okay, keep sending information about my symptoms so there's an ongoing record, even if I don't go back to the rheumatologist on a regular basis. Yes, but I would say go back to him at least. Can you go back every 6 months and just say, I just want to follow up, or 9 months, something. Because even if you win, you're going to need that for your CDRs. You just do. And again, there's usually, I don't know how old you are, Gina, but as we get older, other things are going to, you're not immune from old age deterioration. So those things can be used too to your benefit. It doesn't have to be the one big bad thing that's incurable. You're going to have other things on top of that. It could be degenerative joint disease, disc disease, you know, spinal stenosis, arthritis, right? All right, guys. Claire, you're welcome. And I know you sound like really stressed out about this, Claire. Let's get all that evidence together, my dear. I feel for you. I feel like if you had known more about this, then, you know, you would have done things a little differently. And that's not that rare. I see it a lot. Just push as much as you can for all the records you can think of that could exist. Urgent cares during that time period. Your primary care physician. Hopefully you were the squeaky wheel and bitching and moaning about it. Or maybe not. Sometimes people like to stay in bed and they don't complain to anybody, but they're not even getting out of bed. So, and that's where they don't have the evidence. So just try. Just try. I mean, worst comes to worst, you collect early retirement, and I hate to see that because it's such a discount, but maybe you're already collecting it and you've already taken the discount. I don't know. But hang in there, girl. All right. What are you redacting, Gina? Oh, Gina says, oh, you want me to redact this? Another thing. Sorry, if my therapist sends records files but chooses to redact certain information by some, is that detrimental? It depends. If he's redacting things that would be helpful to your showing you more disabled. Therapists, if you're talking about mental health therapists, Gina, they have the legal rights to not send in psychotherapy notes. It's a carve out of HIPAA access. I understand it in some ways, but it's very detrimental in other ways. So unlike a physical doctor who has to submit everything, the mental health doctor can withhold the psychotherapy notes. However, he cannot withhold the other things in the record, like the mental status exam, how you were looking, sounding, discussing your affect, your mood, your appearance, your this, that, all those things in a mental status exam. How you're behaving, if you're tearful, if you're angry, if you're, keeping eye contact. Not that stuff is supposed to be given up. The psychotherapy notes is really more about protecting from really, really mortifying things, confessions of sorts, things that could hurt family members. That's why they kind of succeeded in that lobby effort to not have to provide them. Sometimes it makes people lose cases, though, unfortunately. So the person to pay is often the patient, but with no Social Security to take home. But that's the basis of it. If he provides everything else, diagnosis, he probably doesn't have anything there about too much about your functional limitations, but if he does, that's helpful. If he has, problem is when they take out some of those psychotherapy notes, the details of those limitations are also taken out because they're part of the psychotherapy notes at times. And so now what they do, even like if they are so gracious to do some sort of like medical source statement for you about, I think she'd be very limited in keeping proper attendance and sticking to a schedule because of her distractions psychologically, blah, blah. There is nothing now in the record to be consistent with that because he took it all out. So, they apparently think they're doing right, but not necessarily so. SSA is not, they're very confidential with all the records. So I always say hopefully don't be too shy about letting those things come in, because it's going to stay in the Social Security file and it's going nowhere. It's just going to be used on your case, but I don't know. People get a little nervous about that. All right. North Carolina dad, NC dad. My medical psychological provider uses Epic. Yep, that's like my chart that allows SSA access to. I noticed my doctors basically copy and paste from one appointment. How do you ask providers for better records? If you find something inaccurate, I would bring it up and say, this is not this is not accurate. This is what happened on this date, and you put it on this date. And on this date, I said this. And of course, for you to remember what you said is going to be hard. Sometimes I think that's why it's good to maybe before every appointment, send in your list of symptoms and complaints and troubles you've had that whole week or whatever it was, so that now that should be in the medical record too. So when they cut and paste some silly, repetitive, old, inaccurate thing, the other stuff is in there too. But it is a huge incompetency in the medical profession, and it drives me crazy. Crazy. Yeah, Contrazy, it could be 6 to 8 weeks, but it really does depend. So, like, if you don't see it in 8 weeks, it doesn't mean that they're not ever going to send it. It could be 12. You know what I mean? It's never carved in stone these days. Not for a long time. Gina says her therapist is redacting things that are very private and have nothing to do with my mental disorders, but he's providing everything else, I believe. Okay. Well, hopefully he's doing a good job, you know? You know, it depends. I mean, why did he take notes on something that has nothing to do with a mental disorder? Usually our experiences do play a part in our mental disorders. So I don't know. How much does it? I'll leave that up to you. But if he kept his psychotherapy notes properly over here and then had all his observations and all the things like discussions about what you said, like you spent 2 days in bed out of depression last week, so you were dysfunctional for 2 days, extreme depression, or you had a panic attack in the grocery store and you had to run out and leave your cart there and go cry in your car and then make it home. That's important stuff. So hopefully he doesn't put that in his psychotherapy notes and it's over here in something not. Because can you imagine how that shows a lot about what happens to you when you're overstressed in a grocery store, which could then transfer to overstress in a workplace, because work always has some level of stress, even those jobs that are supposedly very low stress. I think it's all, you know, in the mind of the beholder. So I guess it'll depend. You'll find out, you know, when you see them. Yeah, I think she said he's not a PhD though. He's got master's in counseling. Yeah, he's a therapist, a counselor. So that's good. He's not a doctor who can prescribe. I don't know if you're on prescription medications. Maybe you're having your PCP prescribe them. Sometimes it's better to have a psychiatrist do it, or sometimes it's like a advanced nurse practitioner who specializes in psychiatry underneath the auspices of a psychiatrist. Because psychiatrists are kind of hard to come by, and so are psychologists, actually. Big shortage, even around by me. It's crazy. Tons of therapists, though. But yeah, they're like the talk therapy ones. And then you can have your medications management with somebody who can prescribe, and that combination. And hopefully they you know, the psychiatrist knows what's going on with the mental health therapist, so that what he prescribes you is for your situation, not just the 15 minutes he gets to eyeball you every 3 months, if you're going to one. I do prefer psychiatrist or advanced nurse practitioner who specializes in psychiatry over a PCP, only because the primary care provider is usually a general and is not a mental health professional at all. So they can prescribe it, but it's just not as direct, I guess. Jana says she does have a psychiatrist who prescribes medication. I've been on this medication for years. Okay. And you know what can be helpful too? If a medication is not doing what you want it to do and they change it up, that can be indicative. That can help show that it's not working, that your problems are continuing. Versus mental health can actually do the job, and most people go back to work on it. So, you know what I mean? If it's not working and there is the occasional change up because it's not working, that can help show that it's not entirely stable. Because if everything's within normal limits and it's doing good and the therapy's doing its job great and the medication is doing great, guess what? You're no longer disabled by your mental health problems. It's properly treated and you're able to function. So remember, it's a double-edged sword. Yep. All right. So, and what is happening today is very important too. So not just the past, but All right, guys. I hope that's it. I am roasting in here. I have a fan on and everything, but it's a little warm. It was good seeing you all, and thank you so much for sticking around, guys. I'll see you next Wednesday. We also have, of course, our dailies at 12 noon every day on the channel, the pre-recordeds, and I hope to see you next Wednesday. Always feel free to ask for, if there's a topic you want discussed. Sometimes I can do them. Sometimes they're kind of put on the back burner. Hi, Breach. You're a little high. You're from Lancaster, Breach. You're late to the game. It's almost 3 hours we've been here. Hello again from Lancaster, PA. I'm going to throw you in here, though, only because you're from Lancaster. Just kidding. Your videos help me. Best wishes to everyone seeking their benefits. I started receiving SSDI and SSI in December. Good. I am very glad for you. And thanks for showing up, even if you're late. We do start at 1 p.m. generally. So anyway, hopefully you can come earlier next time. And if you have questions, definitely feel free. And if any of you guys want some topic you think would be good, definitely feel free to post it under any video, because I do get to them all. I try to write them down, and then sometimes I don't, or sometimes I'm like, where was that notebook where I wrote that down? Because that person had an idea for a video they thought would be helpful. Sometimes I can, sometimes I can't. But in any event, I'm going to go get under the air conditioner, and I'll talk to you guys later. Thanks so much, and have a great week, guys. I'll talk to you.